Good evening. I'd like to start the Marlborough School Committee meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Presentations. Whitcomb School NEASC 2-year progress report.
Hello?
I love that dress.
Thanks. Karen? I'm going to bring you here to keep the seat warm for us. No, Karen's not shy. Good evening. As you can see, our 2-year progress report to NEASC was submitted and electronically accepted. Before we emailed it in, prior to the due date of the 15th, actually it was submitted on the 10th of February. It went to full faculty on the 8th. Great discussions, conversations, points of clarification, and it was approved by full faculty as well. It was included in your packet, and as you can see, there were 59 recommendations made to us by the NEASC organization, and it is all broken down to how many thus far have been completed, how many are in progress, plan for the future, rejected, or no action has been taken. And I guess we're here this evening to keep you abreast of what is happening, and also to tell you that this is indeed a progress report. I firmly believe that this helps set the to-do list going forward. What still has to be done? What hasn't been touched? What has to be continued to be done? And what tweaks need to be made going forward? And with me this evening is Jill Jackson and Karen Savaskis, which are two of the faculty members that were part of the committee. So are there any questions of us or points of clarification or anything?
Questions from the committee. Mrs. Hennessy.
Thank
Bueller.
you. First of all, I imagine this is not an easy process to have to go through, and obviously we've seen a number of the different reports you all have had to put together, which hugely time-consuming, and obviously is kind of in addition to all of the other stuff you all are doing. So I appreciate it. I did have questions about some of it, and I think as we were just chatting quickly, I mean, obviously, everything can't always be in progress. Everything can't always be completed. But can you help to give me a little bit better understanding, because I'm not in the thick of things with you guys, right? And I would love to understand then, how is it that things are then prioritized to work through and accomplish things? Because we can't all get everything done. But yet, in some things where I would see no action labeled, in my mind, I'm kind of like, well, then when does that get started? Who takes the initiative to take that leadership role? And is it, Mr. Daniels, to get going? And where is that priority list, as you were just talking about? And how does that get checked off? So, not to put you necessarily specifically on the hot seat, maybe it's Mr. Daniels, you weighing in, but I'd like to understand that a little bit more. And, I also say I'm a painful type A person, so seeing something listed as a no action does put the hair on the back of my neck at standing and scares the heck out of me. So I want to understand so when is it getting to it?
Karen and I were having that conversation during the today. Yep, exactly. We had that conversation today.
I'm not surprised.
And we used to have an instructional leadership team, and we really would love to have something like a faculty senate in place. And this faculty senate could be in charge of this type of work. What is the to-do list? What is the priority? Well, this is 2 years. So you have to make sure all those non-actions are addressed. So by 5 year, they become in progress. And by your decennial, before your visit, those are indeed completed. And only 9 no actions really isn't that large. But that's that to-do list. And before I leave, I want to make sure that to-do list is really clearly defined going forward. And I think that, and Karen, if you would like to speak to that as well, that a full representation of staff and something similar to a faculty senate that could have that going forward. Karen, would you like to? So, you had a lot to say this afternoon, Karen.
Now she's live on camera.
She's awesome. I'm deaf. I'm pretending that doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, Donna said anything I would say. I would say we need a representative body of both administrative and teacher and, quite frankly, paras in our building that are both appointed and elected to a senate. We talked about how that could happen today, but that would set those priorities because, Donna and I would say priority number one would be academic expectations.
Right.
That would be our priority number one. We have to agree on that as we can't, as individuals, say, yeah,
Right.
we're going to just attack academic expectations. Come on, everybody, we're going to do that. Right? Has to be agreed upon by the school in general.
Right. And I guess, with that, I mean, there was the review of the mission statement, just as a for instance, because that kind of is like that guide,
I
right?
know,
And that's
exactly.
that's a no action on defining that cycle. So for me, I kind of, scratch my head going, well, don't you want that guidance of what you're aiming to do to be that umbrella?
It does lead. That leads everything. That is a driving force.
So I guess that's where I understand and I don't want to take away from all of the work that's been done, so please don't misunderstand the question. But I look at it and I say, it seems like there needs some of those driving forces to be there, such as a mission statement, and then meeting some of the other goals that have been put in place from a district standpoint. Such as when I looked through and I was looking at some of them, the behavior issues and meaning some of the social behavioral issues, kind of some question marks about some inconsistencies. Again, if we're talking about meeting some of our goals from a district, and then I believe there was another mention in regards to our communication efforts and the student support services and the reach out to the parents. Again, reaching back to some of our goals from a district standpoint. So I'm trying to, I understand it's an individual building, but yet we still have those district goals that we need to be reaching to. And I'm looking for how do we take the lead on that and making sure that we're having the same direction overall.
I just want to interject really quickly and say that I think that this progress report is a good jumping off point. It's going to motivate people to start taking action. Just like our students next week are going to receive progress reports, some of them may have let their habits kind of slide a little bit, but it's a good reminder we all need from time to time something to motivate us that's extrinsic. We're not all just sitting at home, thinking about, we really got to revisit that mission statement. Maybe Donna is. but in reality, it's a jumping off point for us to identify those priority areas. And I think that it kind of brings to light some areas that we have maybe, I don't want to say neglected, but that we haven't prioritized, and moving forward, we will be able to attack them meaningfully because now they've come into focus for us.
Yeah. And thank you. Because I guess that's where, and I didn't want to try to read through it and be critical because obviously there are huge strides that have been made in a number of different areas. Yet I think from where I was sitting and thinking about so many of the other, the larger big picture of the goals that we want to achieve district-wide, then do we need to somehow make sure that we're aligning what we're doing NEASC-wise with that, and we're not letting some things maybe drop down the priority scale where they maybe need to be pushed up, and are there ways that we can then help you all, whether it's through the Senate, whether it's helping through working with administration, on trying to give better guidance, better support, whatever it is. Professional development was mentioned in here, and helping that we've made huge changes across the school with the interdisciplinary learning, and have we really moved forward enough on the professional development to make sure that you all have what you need? You know, and we're stepping into the budget process, and I'm assuming that there's going to be a discussion point around that. So, you know, it just got my wheels turning as well. So.
I think it's good. I think it's an important communication, not only within our staff and our district, but, you know, it's just going to help guide us moving forward. So there were a lot of things to address, and like you said, a lot of significant improvements have been made, and, you know, looking forward, our goal is to address all of those outstanding points, but we will have to come up with a cohesive plan to do so.
So I guess to that, what are the next steps other than waiting for the next NEASC report? Like what are we doing then so that we can make something that's going to be more measurable, not waiting for the report to happen, that we can then push that forward?
I would hope that the no action items would become part of faculty meetings next year. I know when the self-study need to be done, that much faculty meeting time was spent on this. This indeed needs to be a priority going forward with faculty meeting time devoted to this, if not professional development time as you get closer. But the mission statement piece, the academic expectations are huge. And they cannot be done with 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. There needs to be time to do that. And that I would assume that would be a priority going forward for the faculty.
I concur.
She's taking the lead. You heard that, right? Okay.
No, I didn't say.
One other thing I wanted to mention, and I will bring it up in my report, is the district improvement plan, which ends 2017. So we've already begun to set in motion, as you know, the committees and the work to regenerate that and upgrade that district improvement plan. So I think what we're talking about here is sort of the convergence of the NEASC recommendations, the district improvement plan, the school improvement plans that are driven from the district improvement plans, and the very broad 3 district goals that we determined to start this year. So the convergence needs to be checked all the time, and I think the DIP will help to set that priority, in motion for Whitcomb, because there will be people from Whitcomb serving on the district improvement plan committees. So it's a beautiful thing when that all happens.
Beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing.
Right, and then I think there was another area mentioned as well about the involvement of the community and parents for the school councils, where we need to
Correct.
really step that up more and have more involvement.
Yep.
Again, we've mentioned this a
Yes,
while.
we believe that we should have parents on this NEASC committee.
Right, because we need to be all working in tandem
Absolutely.
together
In
and
tandem,
have that
absolutely.
collaboration across, and not having it will create, unfortunately, divisiveness as opposed to collaboration. So that'd be great to have. So,
Are there any other
Thank you.
questions?
Any other questions from the committee?
thank you for all the hard
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Really, thank you.
Wait,
One more.
I'm sorry.
So, I'm sorry, I mean, let you go. Just so I kind of understand how this works, it's a progress report. There's some good things, there's some bad things, et cetera, but then now whose responsibility is it? You're saying, is it like a self-governing group? You said you'd like to have a larger group to tackle this, but the progress report has identified some needs. Well, now who does them? That's what I'm saying. Who tackles them?
Well, we were, again, hoping to, we're a committee, a NEASC committee, and we were put together to address this 2-year. What I think we need is a more permanent solution than a committee just to address an upcoming benchmark. We need a committee that's standing, that sets the priorities along with the district goals, along with the school goals, that it's all rather type A planned down from, we're gonna do this step, this step, this step, this step. But we don't have that permanency in place, and that's sort of what we're recommending, is more of a permanent body. We're calling it faculty senate for lack of a better term, but we want something that's more permanent, that sets those priorities, and to be able to go down, make committees, do whatever it needs to get done to get those high priority, no action items, or even in progresses to the completed stage.
And I get that for some of the things that are needed, but I'm looking at some of them that are, in my opinion, is something that maybe the administration needs to fix. I think one of them was something about the paras are used for other things. Yes. You don't need a committee to do, and the committee doesn't assign the paras. So I'm looking for, not looking to who blame, but who's taking responsibility for that? Who's the one that's going to fix that kind of thing? The other ones where it talks about, curriculum or other things that we need to make progress to. I get that a committee would work on those types of ideas, but then there's some in there that are fairly specific, that are actionable now without having a committee. So who does that?
And I'll just add to that. I mean, there could be budget implications, and there's special ed implications. I mean.
Well, why don't I step in? And first, I think clarification is called for. The duties of the NEASC team is to inform the school community, including me, of where we stand in a completely independent manner. Don't touch this report at all until it's handed to me. I may disagree with it, which I could write about separately, but it would not be included in the report because it's a faculty delivered document. Then taking those recommendations, the report that was on my desk when I arrived, that informs me and our leadership team what needs to be done. You can see in this report that we did prioritize. We focused on the large number of recommendations around classroom instruction, and that's where we have focused. I'm a believer that you choose your battles, and then you focus on those. Do the best you can with that task, move on to the next. I completely happen to agree with the representatives from the committee that the next thing to do is to define what success is for students at Whitcomb, what grades mean. We've already had an ad hoc committee called Instruction 101 that has been generating ideas around that will come to the faculty. But this is a 10-year process. The goal setting, I've gone through a number of NEASC studies. These are new goals. This is a new vision statement. You don't immediately start over. This is the vision statement that you claim when the committee comes will guide you into the future. So it doesn't just become the logo for the T-shirts for their visit. But we have a guide. We have a guide in place. The question that's asked there, is there a design for renewing that guide? No, that hasn't been done. But that's a calendar item. That's a comparatively easy thing to do. But right now, we have plenty of direction that the report gives us, as well as the vision statement and mission statement for the school. In my short tenure here at Whitcomb, the leadership team has already been broadened with the addition of our teacher leaders that bring a much broader view of what we need to be doing and how we need to be doing that. The huge change that we made in the collegial structure of the school with this new schedule and dedicated PLC time has led to a much broader impact of faculty voice in what we do. I have absolutely no objections to a faculty senate. I believe when I first arrived that I may have offered that. That I think we would need to talk about how that does or doesn't impact the NEASC report. In the end, the recommendations, whether they were the original report, the 2-year report, the upcoming 5-year report, in the end, the responsibility is mine to address those or to explain why I don't think they're a priority or important, which, by the way, I don't have any on the list that I think aren't a priority. There were a very large number of recommendations in this original report. We have tackled some of, I would claim, the most difficult the most time-consuming. I'm not even sure it's that difficult. Most time-consuming may be defining expectations for each and every academic area. There's just a lot of writing involved in that. But the instructional shift that the NIASC report called for, that's well underway and is huge. And now will drive the thinking about what do we expect from our kids. In the way that we instruct them, what do we expect from them, how do we evaluate them, how do we communicate that evaluation to their parents. And just a quick note on, in the two-year report, there is a reference to parental involvement, which NIASC report referenced. The NIASC report asked for additional parental involvement. There is a completely functioning, and we have members here tonight, the School Improvement Council. That's noted in the report that that's in place and functioning. So this was a suggestion of additional. There was nothing specified on how that might happen, but just a clarification so those two things don't get mixed up.
Thank you. Oh, Mrs. Hennessy.
I guess to Mr. Geary's point, though, like such as with the paraeducator, mentioning and having them, jump in and do things. So that's something that they're not supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's where I think a good point. That's something that has to be addressed.
That's something that we address literally daily. I'll mention that when Mr. Fletcher and I happened to arrive at the same time, we recognized in the summer of our arrival, and from the report as well as from other reports, that this was a huge, huge problem. Continues to be a huge problem. And it boils down to a lack of substitute teachers. That when you have open classrooms and there are no substitutes available in the system, none, you need a responsible adult in that room. I despise the fact that we have to turn to paras, and many of them find it unappetizing. They are dedicated to particular kids. That's where we all want them. But this becomes one of those practical realities, and we are not, as a district, attracting the number of subs that we need in a building my size. With the amount of professional development that's required in the district. So we have people out on professional development, we have people out sick. I sometimes will need 35 people in a day, 35 substitutes. We don't have anywhere near that many.
So is that something from a budget standpoint that we're going to then be looking at to help to, maybe we can't address it fully, but satisfy it some? I mean, I guess that's where, to your point, I'm trying to look and understand about dialogue of some of these issues that are mentioned, which you may or may not agree with, but some of them, it seems like they may have implications that we need to look at. How can we better support you or look to support you all if there are financial issues? And if we are not having appropriate staff to be able to fill in when there are people that aren't there, then we need to look at what those issues are so we can see how we can plug that hole.
Mm-hmm. Well, from a budget point of view, as principal, I have never had any problem in my year and a half of being told that you can't have any more subs. That's right. What I clarified, I hope, is that there aren't any more subs. That's a district-wide committee budgetary decision. It's my understanding that Marlborough pays a rate that's below surrounding communities in many cases. Mm-hmm. I don't know, in this employment environment with the Massachusetts unemployment rate hanging around 2.7, what that number is that would fill our building with well-qualified people. Mm-hmm. But I know that the current situation, and substitutes has always been difficult. And especially in a society where more and more parents, it's two working parents. There isn't that mom at home that can do 2 days a week at the schools. That world is gone.
Right.
So it's an ongoing conundrum, and I think most districts face that challenge. Perhaps more money would bring more folks in. That one is above my pay grade.
But I mean, that's a good point to have so that we know, because then that needs to be a dialogue that is happening during our budget conversations. But if we're unaware of that situation and how it is potentially affecting the staff and the teaching, then we can't try and figure out what other priorities from a financial standpoint need to be made, So it's helpful to hear that and not just hear only when it comes up in budget, but understand the impact that it's creating or the ripple effect that it's creating of not meeting what we need to be doing, right?
No, that's where that effect comes from. If don't want to take away the questions or the earned glory of the team, but I would like to take just one more moment to, first of all, thank Donna Roach for her chairmanship of this entire NEAS process long before I arrived. I know I have done the chair's role. I know what it's like to try to bring a team together to do the original report. This team was seamless, easy for me. Create the time, Mr. Daniels, we'll do the job. I created the time, they did the job. I must say, I think they did a great job. In my letter of introduction, I believe this is a truthful, honest, straightforward report that informs me as leader and us as a faculty. And I thank all of the members for their work. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Caleri, you're up next.
Hold on,
No?
just 1 second, sure. And maybe I wasn't
up next.
clear in the way I was the architect of this, but it seemed like a natural segue. You had some questions on January 24th of Principal Caleri and Principal Daniels, and it seemed as though many of the things you were wanting to hear about the progress of the STEAM program seems to flow from this, as well as his recommendation to move to a trimester, which is certainly, there are seeds of this here in the assessment piece of the report. So I wanted to bring him up to the podium and see if you could ask him some of the questions that you had that night of the 24th.
And if you can't recall them, we could just let that go. So.
Should we start with questions, or do you have anything that you want to say first?
It might be helpful, from what I can recall from the evening's questions, to maybe talk a little bit about the progress of the STEAM program to date, and then your recommendation. I know you've recently surveyed the staff, and your recommendation based on our conversations around a change to grading from quarters to trimester.
Sure. What I am observing, and I elicited little testimony from the teacher leaders at each one of the grade levels, is a school-wide growth in interdisciplinary project-based learning. It's a shift in some ways, and in many ways, from STEM, in that it's not singularly focused on one project, but on a number of projects that are ongoing, some of which are a day and 2 days, some that go on for an extended period of time, some that are simple changes, more well-informed changes in what has been a long-standing instructional lesson. The example that comes to mind is a computer class that I was in early in the year, in which case a lesson that I've seen when I taught a graphic arts course was in there, create a travel brochure. And there's a whole bunch of technology and visual arts skills involved, except for this travel brochure was about the circulatory system, because that teacher, who new to our district, was able to meet regularly with the team, the instructional team, that serves the students that she teaches. And what she saw was, oh, you're going to start this circulatory system? We're going to do a travel brochure. Those two things come together. I would expect, as she rolls into her third trimester, that I might walk in and see the exact same lesson, except for it won't be about the circulatory system, because that's not what we're doing in science right now. It might be something that's going on in history. It might be about a particular place. That's the kind of growth that we're seeing across the school. Our superintendent was kind enough to come to our PTO meeting and take questions, always a good time. And in that questioning period, one of the mothers, self-identified as a 7th grade parent, made the statement, unsolicited, that, well, she did see a regular reference to, well, that project includes the history piece, which is done, but the math piece isn't done. And then we're about to complete the social studies piece, et cetera. And that's what this design has allowed us to do, and to bring in the expertise, influence, and vision, creative vision of our arts people and our computer people. So it's a broadening of thinking about how we think about how we use the knowledge that we are learning. The lead teachers, I have permission to quote, Allison Hathaway, speaking as one of the two leaders in the 5th grade, talked about, and this is one of the things in the schedule that worried me, that the cascading schedule and the drop class allows students a change each day and a time to regroup. Students seem more productive. And in a conversation with Allison, she said, I was worried, as I was, of the drop day in the schedule. And she says, it's worked the exact opposite way. It's a refreshment time. Kids aren't coming back with a loss, but instead enough time to digest, rethink, and then go forward. The increased PLC, that's common time for work and planning, allows for more staff collaboration and has encouraged us to stretch our instructional mindset. If I might call on Ms. Kelly Hall for just a moment to comment briefly, Ms. Hall.
You want me to comment?
On 1,000 days.
We in 5th grade, I discovered that if you counted 180 days times their kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, it equals 900. So in 5th grade, the 100th day of school is actually the 1,000th day of school. So we planned a big celebration, and with our PLC time, we met, there's 16 5th grade teachers. So to get 16 people together and agree on something is a challenge. And also we had the engineering teacher, the art teacher, computer teacher all take part. So we planned a special day, and we broke up into groups of 4s where the students rotated through. We had an art sculpture with 1,000 objects that the kids created, these big toothpick sculptures. There were, they read Sadako and the 1,000 Cranes, which is about a girl who gets cancer. So we ended up making 1,000 Valentines, and we sent it into Dana-Farber, which we already got back a thank you note from them. They loved getting the Valentines for the kids. We brought in the acts of kindness. We wanted the kids to try to get to 1,000 acts of kindness. We collected dimes for Rick Lucina's running the marathon for cancer, so we want to collect 1,000 dimes. I don't even know what the total was. And there was a letter. They had to reflect on what it was like their first day of school up to this point, and then where will you be 1,000 days from now, which they'll be juniors in high school, which is really, I mean, it's amazing. That's cool. And there was one other activity, and I'm not remembering it. So they rotated through the stations, and it was wonderful to have, like, even, you know, kids that you don't know come into your classroom, and now, like, walking through the halls, they're like, you know, you taught me how to make origami cranes. And so it's more than, you know, it's not just the engineering piece, it's more than that. It's more, you know, bringing the subjects and integrating it and letting kids, you know, go through, it was an experience for them. So it wasn't just, you know, I think people sometimes think that STEAM and STEM is more that engineering, science, math piece. And it was bringing the arts in and just letting the kids have that experience.
It was a great day, but I think having that PLC time and working with each other and allowing to collaborate in conversations and breaking up into smaller groups allowed us to do that.
Thank you. Watching 18 professionals come together around an idea that no one had to own or be the single leader for was great pleasure as a building leader. I felt that was a major accomplishment for us. And we snuck in social emotional learning without anyone even looking. So it's quite an accomplishment. In the 6th grade, Hanatola, who is at home with her beautiful baby Claire, but of course still responded to a request for comments, and she has a full page here. I won't go on and on, but she says regarding longer instructional blocks, best thing ever. Those extra 10 minutes or so make a world of difference in what can be accomplished in one instructional period. Lessons are no longer have to be condensed into a mere 40 minutes. In a short faculty survey at our last faculty meeting, when asked to choose between the longer periods having a positive impact, more supportive of learning, no impact on learning, or negatively impacts learning, 82% of the faculty reported that day that it had a more supportive impact on learning, with a mere 3% saying that it had a negative impact. So that the time length, I am surprised, but not a single teacher nor student has come to me to say the periods are too long. They somehow feel just right, as the Three Bears might say. To pop over to 7th grade, Becky Murphy reports much of the same. Kids are invested in our STEAM activities, she says. During the fall, we polled our 7th grade team after completing an interdisciplinary project, and more than 85% of our students felt the STEAM approach was interesting. They included comments as well and reported, quote, "I'm looking forward to more STEAM activities." All of the grade level leaders talk about how much more deeply included what we used to call specials or others or related, no longer related or special, part of the whole. And I just learned about a STEAM project in the 7th grade in which we embalmed apples over the February break. Yes, doesn't that sound pleasant? But what was a pirate lesson last year about mummies in Egypt became a team-wide lesson that included actual embalming, used all 4 of the core academics. It took 10 days to do this apple embalming, so this was what they led into the break with, and came back to find 9 out of 10 apples properly embalmed and 1 horribly disgusting. But my guess is the Egyptians had some of the same results.
Ooh, stings for that person.
Sorry. In the faculty survey, faculty was asked what was the impact of this scheduling change on project-based learning, and 45% reported that they are now doing more project-based learning in this setting. 42% said the same amount, but the comments that were made on the side lead me to believe that many of those people who were doing a lot of project-based learning already, so there wasn't necessarily room for more, but I can't testify to that. And only 2% said that it had any kind of a negative impact on project-based learning. And in the 8th grade, Miss Casey says, let me see, as teacher leader, I feel the schedule and focus on STEAM have started to move my team and the school in a positive direction. I find the longer periods allow me to finish lessons without feeling rushed, leaving more time to understand and address confusion that students express. That's one of the things that a number of teachers have talked about. There's presenting the lesson, it was always room for that. Some practice, there was some room for that. But now there's time to address confusion before we send the mistakes home in homework to be practiced over and over so that we never forget those mistakes, which is not what we would want to go. So there's more time to clarify and send home stronger practice packages. The schedule also allows students to concentrate on 3 core subjects a day, many days. So especially for our 5th graders who are young to be in this middle school model, this helps to focus them a little bit more and not be quite so scattered. So before I can continue on to talk about the possibility of trimesters, or take any questions at this point on where we've gone and where we're going.
Questions from the committee? Mrs. Hennessy.
Thank you.
She's always good for a question or two.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, first of all. It's helpful to hear some of what's going on. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from a lot of community members, as well as I think from some staff that I've had a chance of interacting with at different points in times. I guess one of the things that I have been wondering, though, is about that professional development and how is that moving forward? Because I think, as you were just indicating, there are some people that were already kind of in that mode of project-based learning. That's just kind of their thing. So how has that been moving forward? If I remember correctly, I think PTC had offered up the ability of doing some training, and has it actually occurred, and how many people have been able to take part in that, if that has happened?
Mm-hmm. The PTC course was offered this summer. I believe there were only a couple of takers. That's a pretty intense. I've been done a 2 or 3 day workshop at PTC, and it's very, very intense. There's, the Andrew Chen ongoing math training has been very well received, and with a huge number of people enrolled in that. But I think the biggest impact has been this PLC structure. We have many, many very talented educators in this building, using the expertise that's already in the house. And I think this is something we talked about last year, that we were bringing a third of the faculty that had used this STEM model very successfully, and they were going to bring a huge influence on how groups went forward. That grain has grown, and exactly as I was hoping. This is what the teacher leaders report, that those first days in September and October of all this extra meeting time was, what do we do with all this? I predicted it would take a couple years when people would start to come back and say, oh, what, there isn't enough time. And in our most recent meeting, their comment was, I'm already hearing that. Because once people start to work together and realize what they can do, the possibilities for learning one from another are endless. And of course, we're gifted with being able to reach out to the entire world on the devices that we all hold in our hands. So I think external professional development, while not to go away, is really of less importance in what we're trying to develop.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, that's great that you have that resource right there in the building. I think there'd also been some mention of working with some of the folks at the high school, also that had done some of the training, if I remember correctly. Maybe it was Heather Kahn or something on using that resource as well, because I think she was trained, PTC trained, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to use that resource as well would, seem like another option as well. But
There was a course they offered. Well, she was going to run a course. I don't know. Did it end up running? Do you know offhand? Heather?
I believe it did not.
Yeah, I don't know, because they do offer things, but if they don't get enough people to sign up for the classes.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly. And I think that's something where obviously you do have a great staff. You've got wonderful resources right there. But across the district, we have wonderful staff too. So using someone such as, just as an example, Heather, and I'm sure there are many others, that's another way of helping to spread that wealth of opportunity and knowledge base. But, maybe it is something to delve into. If that course didn't take off, maybe why didn't it take off? And is there another way of offering it in a way that might be easier to fit people's schedule or whatever it is? I think that it's important that we provide them with as much support and opportunity, and I think obviously you're working to do that, but since we're trying to spread it out as effectively as possible, the more collaboration, just like we were talking about when we were talking about the NEASC report, the more collaboration we can have, the sooner the better, so that we aren't having any additional gaps as we're spreading this out and utilizing this STEAM model and utilizing the project-based learning with interdisciplinary skills. So,
As I see Kelly Hall here, it makes me think of the Makerspace PD opportunity
Yes.
that we have 5 or 6 folks, and it's a cross-disciplinary team, and it spans high school and middle school. And the makerspace concept is something I've been wanting to get into for a long time, and it really typifies the integrated, project-based, personalized, authentic, creative, innovative space we're trying to get into, specifically at the middle school and also at the high school as well. So there are some key people who are going. I'm glad Kelly is one of those. I recollect the night that she was awarded the shoe bag, right, Kelly, from the with the makerspace, traveling makerspace. So we can perhaps replicate that and fund more of that in the future.
And to Ms. Hall's credit, she has turned the bags into full working makerspace traveling shows and is about ready to roll that out to 5th grade, literally roll, on 2 floors and making space for that storage, and looking forward to that next level of explosion. And her association with, what's the woman's name?
Tej Dalby, who works in UMass, and so I got involved with the NGSS classes that we were in collaboration with Framingham, and I got involved with this woman who, she actually is partnering with Marlborough.
Yes, she is.
For another grant, but she is just a wealth of knowledge, and she works with Boston Public Schools. And that's how I got involved, and she has these portable maker spaces, and that's, I'm, copying her model and kind of making it my own, but.
And being part of a submission of an article to professional publication regarding maker spaces, I believe Ms. Hall mentioned?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So credit where credit is due.
Thank you.
So
Fabulous.
trimesters, middle school students move at a slightly slower pace, unless they're going to lunch, in which case they move at a much quicker pace. But one of the, having spent my instructional career in high school, one of the biggest adjustments for me coming into middle school was just how long a unit can take. Whether it be a book, a piece of processed writing, it takes an extended period of time for students to practice, build, rebuild, re-practice the skills that they need to be successful. Recognizing that, and especially recognizing how quickly, and even as a high school teacher, this was a difficulty, how very quickly the early weeks of the year pass, and suddenly you're in a grading cycle, a publicized grading cycle. Our middle school students, and the younger they are, the harder this is for them, have to establish themselves in much larger groups. Remember, they're members of teams of about 50 to 60 students rather than 1 in 20 in a elementary setting, and then receive this first, and I'm going to use the word label, not pejoratively, but descriptively. And so some few weeks into school, they're receiving that first label of, and for the first time here in Marlborough, you are a fill in the blank, B student, C student, A student. And it is my feeling, and in conversation with the Improvement Council, and having discussed this with the faculty in the second half of last year and received comments, and the faculty members on the Improvement Council, we believe that trimesters much better serve the learning style and skill development of middle school students. It also matches the related arts, the off-team classrooms that we are able to offer. There was a conscious decision to make these 60-day classrooms rather than 45, feeling that 45, when you talk about 5 or 6 first classes to get to know each other, 5 or 6 to come to a conclusion, it's a very short period of time. So when we designed this new schedule, we designed around 60 days, which was also something we could do with within the budget, and that, of course, matches a trimester model. We believe that, and it will be an ongoing project to educate and encourage parents to use Aspen in a constructive manner. There was a Boston Globe cartoon on the funnies page 2 weeks ago about a mom leaning over a child saying, explain this to me, your math grade dropped 2/100ths of a point in the last 15 seconds as they're checking out Aspen together. But this tool is our future of how we're going to inform, monitor, and guide, as opposed to individual stopping points where today you are. And it has always concerned me that somewhere in the first month and a half of school, that first label comes, and now you're either working for it or against it or accepting it as who I am. This gives us more time to get to know that student more in depth. There are many more formative evaluations in middle school and fewer summative evaluations. Summatives tend to are where we go when we create that grade. Formatives are the whole learning process, and we want to give that learning process as much breathing room as possible before we get to one of those stop points. And as much as report cards are a stop point, teachers have to focus, at least for a day or two, on this job, start over. As a teacher, I gave the regular lecture about, and now today's a new day and everyone starts with 100. Whether I really believe that in my heart or not is a different matter, right? But made the offer. So to put fewer of these stop points into the school year, we also think is important. So Julia Dalbeck from the council is here tonight. Kelly also serves on the council, and Kinslow, and I can share with you what the faculty had to say in the survey. Move to trimesters. We had 68% of the faculty said that that would better serve our students. We had 7% say that no, it would not better serve our students, would be a negative, and 20% who were neutral about it, that it could go either way. And then when asked to choose from a menu of benefits, we had the same 7% saying there would be no benefit, which is understandable. But we had numbers ranging in from 29% to 40%, that this would create less anxiety for students, and a couple of teachers wrote on the side, and for teachers. That trimesters better supports a project-based learning design. These projects take time. And this was chosen by many, many, many people, more meaningful grades. That when the grades did finally come out, especially, and there were a lot of notes about, and then especially that first grading period, that grades would be more meaningful. So that was the mix of benefits that the faculty in a survey felt would be there if we could move to trimesters. Questions for me or for folks from the council?
So you explained the reasoning behind trying to go trimester. Another aspect that I would put to you is that although we are trying to teach the students and try to figure what suits them best now, we are also responsible for preparing them for what it's going to be like in high school as well. So if high school is for grading periods and that's much shorter, how do we make that transition? Is that going to put more pressure on that first quarter of freshman year versus what they've had three semesters every year in middle school?
Well, it certainly would be a change for them. I would argue that more developmentally appropriate at that age than it is at 11. And that's the difference. And it comes up very often in educational conversations about preparing for the next. But we're in this step right now. I work with teachers who work with middle school students every day. They are not, I worked with high school students, and middle school students are not high school students. The changes, our fifth graders aren't eighth graders. The changes are huge.
Can I jump in really
Yeah.
quick?
Pop up so you can talk in there.
Come on up. I'm sorry, what?
Pop up so you can talk, so.
Sorry, that's okay. Teaching fifth grade, students are transitioning from elementary school and they're using standard-based report cards. So coming into fifth grade, this is their first experience with grades. So when you have quarters, I mean, you're spending the first month just getting to know, they're coming into this huge building, using lockers, switching classes, and then we're throwing grades on top of that. So I know we've got to think about what you said going forth, but that transition, they're, 11 years old, and they're going from, having just, outstanding or whatever their grades were to now getting letter grades. So I think that, we did have the same argument in our council, and we just felt like, they're younger, they're not ready to handle that. Like you're saying, going from the high school is going into quarters. But if they're, not in ninth grade, it's quicker for them to adjust than a fifth grader coming to a middle school setting.
I was referring more to the other end, not the fifth grade.
No, but I'm just kind of bringing you down to the end where I'm at, and it is hard, for them to all of a sudden get letter grades. And it seems like, we're starting school and we're doing progress reports 4 weeks into it, and there's no grades, and then, or if there is a grade and it's not a great grade, you might have a little guy that's going to start the year off with grades that really aren't representative of them because they're still transitioning. I just wanted to say that we had arguments we saw both sides of it, and we talked about that they're young kids. Yeah.
And I welcome Mr. Cleary's comments. Our shortcomings in the middle school that impact the high school are things that we need to be attentive to. I'm not sure that this would be one of those. I don't believe that this would be one of those. It's certainly a practice that is used very broadly in middle schools. It's not exceptional, and it's not exceptional for then that same district to use quarters in high school. Both of my other middle school assignments were in this model.
Mrs. Hennessy. Sorry, just to comment on that, because you and I actually have talked back and forth on this a lot, only because from a parent standpoint, receiving a quarterly report card and not having the information about whatever that trimester course is aggravating, I guess I would say. Because then you're getting a bit of a benchmark only on some courses and not on other courses, which I think when we start talking about equity issues, which we've had a lot of conversations with, it feels like something is not meeting equitability, if that is even a word, whatever. But it's just, I think it causes a lot of strife of only getting some information and only giving some picture. So if we're going to be really working with more of a trimester, which is a little bit more of a push because of the STEAM model, because of having the art, the engineering, and the instructional technology courses, it's pushing towards a trimester, and where I don't know that I necessarily would have jumped this far before making this kind of change to the schedule, this past year. But now with it in place, it's very awkward to only receive a portion of how your child is doing. And I think it causes more angst rather than actually supporting what's really going on, because you're not getting a full picture.
It is
no matter
awkward.
what.
I completely agree. This does take care of that. But the thinking behind it is that's a nice addition. And I think a necessary addition, but not the driving force. And
It just puts
But
a
it cleans
little
that
bit
up.
more onus, I would say, on, the staff to make sure that there's much more communication going on, because the way that things have shifted as far as progress reports not necessarily going home and Aspen becoming much more important, it seems like if we are going to be moving towards the trimester situation and also utilizing that from a grading standpoint, there needs to be a lot more impact from you and the rest of administration on the importance of communication and dialogue between each of the staff members and the parents, as well as the students, much earlier in the process, so that students that are maybe having a hard time transitioning, we're not waiting to have those conversations too late.
we are on the exact same page there.
Right, which goes back to, again, conversations we were having during the NEAS report about the support services and beefing up in that area, not necessarily just strictly on to the teachers, but then making sure we're providing all of those support services across the school so that we're not having that come late in the game, so.
Any other questions? Mrs. Hennessy.
My only other, because we went to trimesters before I got to finish asking a question, you didn't really mention much about enrichment, which was something that you brought into play, and I guess I'd like to understand a little bit about how that enrichment piece is really working. What are we seeing that are positives? What are things that we can be improving upon?
Well, we have enrichment opportunities in the 5th grade and the 6th grade. The 5th grade uses it much like they had prior. Their smaller numbers allow. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, everyone.
For the evening, too. Where they're moving students within their team on a regular basis. One of the negative comments that Allison Hathaway shared with me was that the enrichment period has so many demands on it, because for 5th grade, too often the students who could use the extra help, the make-up tests, are also the students who are needing some kind of ELL support or special education support. And as she said at the end of our conversation, that piece just seems to be the nature of the beast. And that goes back to one of the first presentations that I brought to the committee, that the pie doesn't get any bigger, but the demands on the pieces just continue to grow. But at last year, and I will continue to sing their praises, I believe the 5th grade makes spectacular use of the enrichment time on a daily, minute-by-minute basis, adjusting to the individual needs of students each and every day. I believe last year I may have said that I would continue to support that period in the schedule if I saw it being used the same way in 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that is a piece that was in place that I claim no credit for, that's extremely well done. Hanatola does include in her page a comment, and since she is the architect of enrichment in the 6th grade, I will share what she has to say. Enrichment, a fantastic opportunity for 6th grade students. It has been going very well. Students are getting regular access to extra help in math and ELA, and these students are assigned to those extra help groups. It's not wait and ask. This is where you go during this period. These are instructional periods. Most students have the opportunity of a choice activity. And remember, that was part of that design, so that that student who needs extra help isn't always the one left out of all of the other things. Students are also being taught growth mindset lessons. This is a new addition that we're right in the middle of now that solved a contractual problem and brought something positive to the entire class. The growth mindset lessons are really well put together and a fabulous way to learn about growth mindset for both students and teachers. We've also enjoyed a huge amount of DBT training for our counselors this year, and that's a piece that we would roll into enrichment opportunities. So some of that relates to the mindfulness stuff that we could roll into this program next year when those folks are all fully trained. So I'm actually excited. I wish there was a way to offer the same enrichment model to grades 7 and 8, but of course that's where world language stands, and I believe that should be the priority. But the opportunity for a limited period of time to experience something that isn't in the regular curriculum, and that your teacher is genuinely excited about. Role models for students, the people that they might become in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
All right, I'll leave it to the committee. I believe there's a policy change involved, but
Yes.
you'll work
Yes.
through that.
Yes.
Mr. Cleary, I think you might be next.
Yes, Mr. Clary.
Mr. Cleary, yes. Sorry, I was distracted.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you? Thank you for allowing me to come tonight. I wanted to update you relative to the scheduling process. Ultimately, because the last time I was here, I think it was just before the pilot, the schedule pilot, and I want to update you as to where we were, the steps that we've taken to ultimately kind of reach a final conclusion. We're not quite at a final conclusion yet, but I'll let you know kind of where we are to some extent. So first, I wanted to say, as I shared before, the members of the scheduling committee have been absolutely terrific. The leadership of Heather Kahn and Sharon Buckley has been wonderful in the building. With this committee, the group is about 12 folks large, representation from cross disciplines, as well as representation from teacher leaders, coordinators, myself, and other teachers. So I wanted to say thanks to the members of the committee for doing all of this work. When we do have a kind of a final piece, a final schedule to present, then I'll bring those members from the committee here for the presentation for that, but this is just an update. The pilot, if you remember correctly, we had a number of different variables that we were testing during that process. That was the point of doing the pilot, which was ultimately to collect feedback, and we did get a lot of feedback, which is really nice to hear. Specifically, we sent out surveys to faculty, to students, to parents. We collected over 500 pieces of responses from folks. So about 60 or so faculty members, 40 or so, 50 or so parents, and about 400 students participated in the process to provide feedback, which we were very pleased with in terms of the response rate. From the pilot, we were looking at a number of different things. The impetus for it was to try to increase instructional time. That was the piece, the lion's share of the process of trying a new schedule. We're also looking at embedding long blocks. Instead of having dedicated days with long blocks in them, we would have long blocks of time embedded in each of the different days of the rotation. We wanted to try out having classes at different times of the day. It wasn't a perfect rotation, just because of the middle of a year, you can't create that. We wanted to see what it would be like to not have classes meet every day, to have some, as Brian had referenced before, dropping classes on a different day to see what impact that would have. We wanted to try out kind of an intervention period, intervention/enrichment period with the formation of the Panther period. We wanted to see what the impact would be of having fewer homeroom periods, because that was a place where we were trying to recoup some instructional time. And we also tried out having announcements at different times of the day as opposed to what we traditionally had done. We had learned a number of things from the feedback, kind of combing through all of the responses and meeting a series of times following the pilot, so from January and February. In general, what we learned is that embedding the long block was not as effective as we expected it was. In fact, what a lot of people had shared was that the length of the long period when we embedded it was a little bit too long. even though it was the same length as what we would normally have in a block day. And it made things a little bit challenging for the kids as well as the staff in terms of meeting the needs of the content in the curriculum, because it created a bit of a disjointed nature. What they did say in terms of recommendations was to look at conceivably making classes more the same length, increasing the length of instructional time and making them more consistent and more the same length, which is something that we took into account. And that feedback came through loud and clear from faculty and from students. Roughly 54% of our folks kind of said, we're looking for kind of same length periods. That would be really helpful. We had also checked kind of seeing about that drop period. And we had a number of folks that indicated that having that drop period actually was a good thing. In terms of, we had a different Likert scale that we used. We went from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree with a neutral in the middle. So in terms of our response rate, we had about 45% or so of our students and parents who said that we don't have to have our classes meet every day. We had a number of folks, 25% or so that kind of fell in the neutral category, and then a chunk that fell in the we should meet every day. So we're kind of moving towards the area of majority. We looked at announcements, that people still wanted those at the beginning of the day in some way, shape, or form. The Panther period was very well received. Approximately, if I take an average between the students and the teachers, about 75% were in support of the Panther period, that it should meet once per week. They felt that it was very positive in terms of over 60% of the folks kind of said it was really helpful. And when we looked at some of the students who were struggling, those students, if we compared kind of performance, because we actually were able to track some of the student survey information, compare some of that, the students that participated in some of the intervention periods actually were some of our largest supporters of it, as well as teachers of those working with those students as well. When we looked at different rotations and ideas, we had a large percentage of folks that indicated that rotating the schedule would be a good idea, recognizing that the rotation in the pilot was not what we had in mind. And that was difficult to sift through because the pilot rotation was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I had shared that at the outset. And we shared that with kids and with faculty, and we kind of said, we're just experimenting. We want to see what it's like. If you didn't have G last period, what would that be like? And if you had C first period, what would that be like? It's not perfect, it's not predictable, but in general, people kind of prefer that rotation idea. It split across the groups, so teachers really preferred it. High percentage, 60% or so, kind of preferred having different times. The students kind of fell in this category of kind of, well, it's okay, it's fine, and parents split on both ends. So in terms of some really thought it would be a good idea to rotate, others said, no, it's not such a good idea to rotate. We looked at, in terms of some other feedback we received, was that people wanted the Panther period to continue for the rest of the year if we could. They would have loved to have seen it continue, which was great to hear, frankly. And that was just a modified version of what Panther could be. It was just kind of a little snapshot to see if we could kind of work on this. And also, we had fewer homeroom periods during the pilot. So there was feedback that said, you know, it'd be great if we could have a few more homerooms than we did. So increasing the frequency of homeroom. So what the committee did with this work is that we identified kind of criteria out of what we're going to do to modify the schedule to come up with other solutions. And so ultimately the criteria that we're looking at is increasing time on learning, make a more predictable rotation with a 1-period drop, to have more frequent Panther periods, or at least have frequent period, once per cycle, once per week, something to that effect. Have classes similar in time and length, and to kind of shoot for having more homeroom than we did in the pilot. So since that time, the committee has come up with a number of different versions of 2 different kinds of schedules, which offer similar length class periods, and either over a 5-day cycle or a 6-day cycle, and we're also exploring a 7-day cycle. So that's at the point right now, that's where we are in terms of kind of narrowing this down. So what we've done with this is calculated time on learning to see where we fall. This falls in the category of 1,014 to 1,020 hours, roughly, for any one of the schedules that we use. And what we're doing next is kind of taking these proposed versions and then meeting with select folks. some faculty, some students, leadership team, and so on, to collect additional feedback to make sure that we kind of hit the mark. We have a lot of survey results. We feel confident in the feedback that we have, but we also want to make sure that we're not going down the wrong path and get one that's actually going to work. In addition to that, there has been conversation with some of the MEA representatives, but there'll be further conversation with MEA leadership as well to kind of talk about that. So the goal is ultimately to start the school year next year with a new schedule that kind of meets the criteria that we've established, and more importantly establishes more time on learning for our kids. So with that being said, I open it up to questions that you might have.
Questions from the committee? Anyone beside Mrs. Hennessy? We'll let you go last.
I'll go first this time.
Mrs. Matthews.
Thank you for the information. Question, I guess one of the questions that I didn't hear you saying, and I don't know if it was addressed in your survey, was how to address the common sections. I know that was, I heard the rippling effect that if a teacher has two sections that are at the same level, and since that was a major, major issue during the 2-week period, or the 4-week, the 2 cycle, that a lot of teachers were having a very difficult time, and students were having a difficult time because you can't pace it. So you didn't mention that in the adjustments.
Oh, in terms of the follow-up?
Yes.
If all of the issue with the issue
long
with
block.
the
So if
adjustment,
you're eliminating the long
the
block.
long block is, and if all the blocks are the same length, then that problem is essentially addressed.
So, but even if you went to a rotation or a drop,
Yep.
you wouldn't have as far a gap, is what you're saying?
Correct. Yes. And over the span of
A 5, 6, or 7 day,
they'll meet the same number of times.
Okay.
For the same amount of time.
because I know that was a
But with the
big-
long block, we kind of expected something like that was going to happen because our school has been using the schedule for some time. And so there's a
Yeah,
comfort and familiarity with.
Yeah, I mean,
working with
just as you get feedback
different
saying they
days.
want to hear the
Yes.
announcements first thing in the morning, I kind of get that,
Right.
you know? I mean, I heard from many different kids at different levels, they were like, well, all of a sudden, the teacher would be in the middle of a lesson and beep, and, here's the announcement. It's like, wait, why are we getting an announcement now when
Right.
15 minutes into the class or
Yep.
whatever? So, obviously, you have to work out kinks, get it.
I think, if I may,
Yeah.
I think it was interesting to see the evolution of the feedback from folks, because I was collecting feedback from individuals all along during the entire pilot, speaking to teachers, speaking to students, speaking to whomever wanted to chat about the schedule, like, have at it. And for the first 3 days, it was challenging, because in simple terms, it was new, and it was very different. And over those 3 days, we actually had 3 different bell schedules. And so people were kind of confused.
I happened to walk into the building
Yes.
in the second week,
Yep.
in between periods, and kind of got a good chuckle of the easels and the staff having to stand in the hallways and, yes, it's this period, and having a chart and where we are and what time is it, and I'm going, oh my God, I can't imagine doing this.
In a weird way, but it was actually fun.
And you standing in the foyer in the morning going, guess what day it is?
And just telling people, starting with A today, starting with A.
Exactly.
And so that was part of, sometimes change is good. And so in this regard, absolutely.
Right.
So like the first 3 days, it was difficult. It was funny, because when we came back from the break, because this went from Thanksgiving to the
Christmas,
winter
right.
break. And when we returned from winter break, a lot of people were kind of like, oh, we're back to our regular schedule now? Oh, okay.
getting that
kind of
update each
missed
day.
this. So it was just interesting, like informal feedback. I wouldn't have anything to quantify that, but.
When do you anticipate having if you're gonna go to something for the fall,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yep.
the seniors, we don't need, they're in their own little world.
Yep.
But is there gonna be some time for discussion amongst the students, the staff, obviously with MEA, but?
The student, we were going to use we had conversation with, we had feedback collection from kids already. So the next phase of this, in terms of collecting additional feedback about different versions, is speaking to representative groups from the student body. So the easiest place to start with that is kind of student council and with student representatives. and student leadership for each of the classes. So that's where this would
So,
go.
and you didn't say it, and I just want to clarify it, so if anybody's listening, you're still maintaining a 7-period schedule in the day?
Currently, right now,
No,
if we drop a period, no. So that would be 6 periods in a day.
okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. It has a bigger impact, so, on a lot of different things, so, yeah.
Okay. I think we.
Yeah, right,
But those are the conversations that we're having as a
okay.
committee and as a leadership team. So that's where I expect any of those pieces will come up.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Hennessy.
Of course I did.
Thank you for the insight. It's good to hear, obviously, that the data points and getting the information. And change is always hard, but why not, right?
Sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah, sometimes there are things that have to change. And
Exactly.
inevitably, if we have more instructional time, then
Right,
our
so-
teachers, our teachers are great in our building. So
Oh, yeah.
if I can give them more time to work with kids, all the better.
It will make an impact,
Yeah.
so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So to that point, I'm making an impact in time on learning. It goes back to questions about study halls. And I'm just curious because if we're doing rotating schedules and study halls are certain timeframes, and this goes back to, yes, the painful person that I am on saying it drives me nuts that people have study halls at the beginning of the day or the end of the day and they get to leave or come into school late. And I know I won't be popular with seniors on saying that, but I'm really not here for a popularity contest. Our whole point when we were making our graduation requirements was looking to make sure that we were having full schedules, full capitalization of what our students could get from what we had to offer, right? And so I guess my big thing is if we're going to start making these changes, which, I have to say, I'm fine with moving forward on some of the changes. I just want to see how we are changing our impact of usage of time so that we aren't having longer periods of time where kids are in study halls. Because that's going to just put me over the edge personally. I want to see kids having more time in classrooms, getting the time on learning, and having more impact in their studies, not just meeting the grade, the credits, I guess, if you will. Because for me, if we're not working to have fuller schedules, then you just talked about a policy change, then I guess we're talking about a policy change needing to be looked at in regards to graduation requirements that I'd want to float, because our whole point was trying to make sure that we want to make sure that we're giving the students full opportunity of full schedules. And having, 99 students in 12th grade with study halls, 89 11th graders, 59 10th graders, and 47 9th graders having study halls concerns me greatly. And I'm sure it does you as well, but then I think that we have to put that as how are we in making maybe schedule changes or however we're moving forward, not necessarily have as many students in that situation. To me, that's a huge part of however we are working to adapt the schedule is also talking about effective use of
Time.
the time. And however we can do that to best support you in making those changes, I'm all for that. I just, I don't want to see that large numbers of kids that are in study halls. And I'm sure for some folks it is good use of time so they can get homework done, so they're able to go to work or, their athletics or their music or whatever it might be after school. But I do want to make sure that we are fulfilling strength and rigor in their academics too. So.
I've said this to my staff, I've said it here, is the goal is to kind of reduce study halls, period. the challenge is always the same, is that when you have any matrix of schedules that you offer, and placing students into those classes, there's not always a perfect fit. And so the challenge is trying to run schedules that make it so that every kid can be in every class and have full schedules. There are very few schools, the high schools, that have either no studies, largely because of the issue of not being able to fit kids into every class. And that's part of the challenge. So we continue to look at that. The numbers that you cited are numbers that I shared with you, or shared with Superintendent Grulich, relative to the numbers that we've seen over the span of the year. So it's difficult, as I shared in that communication, it's difficult to assess how many of those kids are from first semester or second semester. That's the total for the year. And so, because we've had a few issues with Aspen this year with counting study halls properly. So it is something that we continue to try to address. I would love to be able to stand here and say, I'm eliminating all study halls, and I guarantee you that we will not have study halls next year, but I can't say that. Only because once we put everything into the system and figure out what classes we are running, then it makes it a little bit more complicated. But your feelings are noted and are in accord with my own, and in accord with our leadership team as well. So the next phase is figuring out actually how to do it.
And then to that point, something that you had spoken about, very early on after you got in here, when we were talking about programs of studies, was adding more and more semester courses to then help alleviate some of those issues about scheduling.
Right, which we are. I mean, the challenge with that always comes with, I know that this is not a budget conversation, but the challenge always comes with the more that you add, then that has to come from somewhere. So it's either kids are leaving some place that they were before. So as much as you're saying, well, I'm adding a semester course in blank, then you'd like to say that it's going to pull more kids from a study hall or pull more kids from something else, but it may not be the interest area that they are looking to take. And some students are also looking at it from a standpoint of, I know that I can be successful with 6 classes, and I need this time during the day. If I can get a study hall, then I'm going to take advantage of it, because it'll make sure that I pass my 6 classes that I'm taking. So, and I understand that. And I mean, if you look at kind of the numbers as we go through from 9 to 12, you see kind of that trajectory of students becoming more responsible for their own learning and understanding what they need in order to be successful.
You go.
Because I want to piggyback. I didn't know you were going to go that direction yet. I was waiting. Sorry. But that's okay. No, that's okay. So, but Ms. Hennessy brings up an interesting point, and to your point about a student becoming more aware of what their needs are. And I'll be the devil's advocate in that and say there's also, we've created a policy, and we've had this conversation regarding our graduation requirements. And while we tightened it up a little bit as far as minimums, especially because we would have seniors who would take 2 classes, or now you can't get away with that because of the requirements statewide, not just our policy. But when you see that number increasing as they get to seniors, I don't always agree that it's because they're making a choice of having a study period. It's they've met the requirement, they don't need to. Some of those 99 have had 1 or 2 each term, the fall and spring, for studies. That being said, yes, I know you were making the attempt through adding semester classes, and I do have to say, the caveat to this is that my concern that came about most recently was, as everybody publicly knows, I'm not a believer in the study halls, and I'd rather see children being challenged in an area that they're not accustomed to, whatever. But I have a concern of creating these semester classes and then them not being weighted towards their GPA, because then they should be sitting in a study hall. And I didn't know that that's what was happening until this year. So I have a concern about that they're not part of their GPA, because that's the opportunity for kids. So how do we address, if we're going to supplement them with something else, to make it count? Because quite honestly, we could all go through the program of studies and say there are some courses currently that are full year or single semester that are weighted are computed in the GPA, or leveled and computed in the GPA that probably shouldn't be, but they've just been there historically. And then, I mean, I did not know, and I don't know if any parent knew, that these semester classes, the newest ones, were not. You know, kids are coming back going, oh, it's just pass-fail. And I'm going, what do you mean they're just pass-fail? Well, no, they're getting a grade, but it's not going towards their GPA. So.
I'd have to look at that, because I
Okay.
don't know that that's entirely accurate. So
Okay.
let me look at that, because we're doing, as part of our scheduling process now anyway, we're reviewing all of our courses and the information that's in there, so there's like lots of trains running at the same
Okay,
time.
all right, no, if you would,
One
because
of them
I mean,
is-
because I think it's important if we can, if we're gonna offer any type of elective.
So I think the question is this an anomaly with infectious diseases, or is this the protocol you're using for a
Right.
new semester course not having a weighted average?
Right.
Is that just an anomaly?
That, I have to look at that.
And it may well be.
Yeah, I have
It
to
may
look
be,
at that.
right,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
so if you wouldn't mind on that one, that's specific. But on going back to the number of study halls, and if you're reducing down to those 6 periods, 7 periods, we'll say, because it's a droppings. I would like to think that a child, a young adult, recognizes that they have a need for a study period. With the help of the AP and the guidance department. And the team that says, this child really needs this time, versus just shoving them into an extra. So I think it opens up more of that opportunity for that conversation.
Yep, I think you're right.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else?
I think a piece of this, Heidi, if I might, when you say we want more kids to take more classes with more rigor, piece that you mentioned before, which I agree. I also know that there are students that are intimately aware of what this taking a rigorous course load would mean, and the impact that that would have if they stumble on their ability to participate in other events. And so that, I'm just being honest, because the reason I say it is because of that, the study halls for some kids, that they want to make sure that they're doing well in their classes.
Right.
So that they can also make sure that they're meeting the eligibility requirements for them to participate in different things. That's a part of this too. So
Yes.
I don't want to,
And I don't disagree.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that.
No, and I don't disagree.
Yep.
And prior to you coming to the district, when we had the conversation about the eligibility, we were the ones who said, this is going into place, but we need to put the safety nets into place in the buildings. And so if we, as a community, are not doing our job in supporting that student who does need that extra help, then we failed. I would rather see the bar here and us getting every kid to there. So, and that was our intent from the get-go.
Yep.
So,
Well, and I think when when the state changed the
Score.
Mass Core to include the arts, I mean, like, I don't think that having students taking more classes necessarily has to raise the rigor and the homework and all that. It's just opening them up to other possibilities. I mean, in college, I took a class in fencing. You know, I mean, I remember, there are ways to present other topics that we can expose kids to in the arts, in in fitness, and as we. It could be yoga. It could be mindfulness. I mean, there could lots of things. That doesn't mean they have to, be taking an extra AP
Right.
science class.
But all of those
Right.
classes that we're proposing
Yes.
require,
Time,
time, they also require staffing.
staffing, absolutely.
And flexibility within the schedule to actually make sure that they happen, and be able to get them. So that's, part of the future conversation when we talk about budget and the like, that will come up. But, I mean, I appreciate you saying what you said.
Michelle, to that point though, as well, and you were heading down that path, but that was one of the conversations we had when we were making adjustments for the changes with Mass Core, changing the graduation requirements, and also when Mr. Langlois was very definite on wanting the sports waiver changed. And so this was all, all of this, yes, pre you having to be here through all of that. But it was a lot of domino effect of things that were going to need to change to make sure that we were supporting all over, going down the path of making changes to the wellness curriculum and, all of that. It all walks hand in hand of how to get it done. So, I like to hear about the changes. It's just making sure that we're still able to offer the options, understanding we can't give them everything, but then making sure that we're well able to allow the time to be utilized correctly and as fully as possible, and kind of thinking a little bit more out of the box than maybe we have at some other points in times, and I guess that to me would be the challenge with looking at the schedule, is it's not really just the schedule.
Right.
Right?
Well, it has a lot.
It has all of these other little moving parts
Correct.
that are
Well,
affected
because
too.
the other piece, we're piloting it this year with common planning time in our core disciplines, but that's something that I'd want to be able to implement within a new schedule. And unfortunately, with the nature of a high school, it's reasonably close to impossible to do it, to get the entire staff to have common planning time. And so then that leads me to come up and say, okay, can we have occasional staggered openings to allow for planning time? So can I flip the start time once a month, twice a month, to get teachers to come in and have 2 hours of time to kind of do some of the work that they should be able to do during the context of a school day, to build the curriculum that they need to in support of all of their kids and the stuff. And that's not a schedule that I'm coming to you with, but that is an idea that keeps floating through my mind.
The 2 hour delay for just the high school, and the kids are all going like, yes! And the parents are like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in talking to other schools about how they implement common planning time, a lot of them are doing that.
Right.
Or they're doing early release, but realistically on the sleep cycle of adolescence, it makes more sense to do a staggered opening and have them come in a little bit later because they're more attuned to being there. And then there are other schools that are doing similar ideas, but because they won't do a staggered opening, they'll bring all of the kids in and essentially place them in kind of like a holding area.
Yeah.
Not in a formal sense. I don't want to make it seem like we're like having like a pen, but giving them access to library, cafeteria, access to other like common areas in a school for kids to work independently.
Yeah.
And like those are some of the out of the box ways that people are trying to provide common planning time to other disciplines when they can't access it through the rest of the schedule.
Just give them Saturday school.
There you go.
So, right. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
But those are the things that, keep floating through my mind, and I keep saying, okay, so when are we going to actually have this conversation?
Well, yeah, and the other safety net, which I thought you were heading to and you didn't mention, was part of, again, when we were talking about the requirements and needing to make sure we were maintaining higher grades for participation in the extracurricular, was working with, I know specifically we had conversations with Jeff Rosinski for athletics about having required homework time. If practice was going to be later, they were supposed to have, set homework period where the people, that the teams were all going to meet here, here, and here. So my hope would be, where I 100% hear your comment about the kids sometimes needing that time. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Then isn't it our challenge then of finding, instead of them, hanging out on their own for an hour and a half until the practice begins, that we get them into the library so they are using their time effectively, right? And they're getting the homework time, and it's not taking away from time on learning.
Right.
Right.
Which, a number of athletes are accessing the homework center that we currently run, but that's only 3 days a week. And
maybe we move that up more.
Right. But again, all of these pieces have budgetary impact because what you're talking about is after-school time, after contractual hours for most people. So it's above and beyond what's reasonably expected. So I'm not saying, I agree with you. We should be actually giving more kids more opportunities to kind of catch up on the stuff that they need and support them. But at the same time, it's not, I wish I could just wave my magic wand and say, yep, here it is, we're done.
Just wave away.
Right.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Are you going to speak to teaming and STEAM to STEM?
What was the question relative to that?
Just an update.
Well, one of the concerns that we had raised was that with the STEAM model in the middle
The
school.
new structure.
The new structure at the
Yep.
middle school, how are we going to handle the incoming freshmen who are going to either go into STEM, or are you looking to do a teaming model that's STEAM in ninth grade? What's your plan for succession?
In
Let's put it
terms
that
of
way.
STEM, the structure for the team would be the same as it had been, which is to say that we still have always had the option of doing STEAM as part of that, but due to the nature of the scheduling process, it would be difficult to create a 6-member, because essentially that's what we're asking for, is a 6-member team, which is going to further reduce all of the pieces for flexibility for any other departments and access for other kids. So realistically, for what we've been doing with STEAM up to this point is that students can elect to take an art foundations course where the nature of that course is linked to the STEM work that's being done. And so that was through collaboration between the art department as well as the STEM teachers. That had been happening for the past 3 years, I believe.
So obviously, Mr. Riley's not here to answer it, who's been through the transitions prior. But I guess my question, if I were a parent of a current 8th grader, what am I looking at as far as 9th grade? Are we going to go through the application process again for STEM?
Yes. The process for admittance into STEM will be the same as it had been, which is to say that students sign up in 8th grade to participate in 9th.
And I know the numbers were decreasing over the last couple of years for multitudes of reasons, but I'm concerned, I guess, that it may continue to decrease only because of the model having changed to STEAM. And I'm not saying that STEM is the answer per se, but the teaming, I guess, is really what we know works. We have seen the numbers, the measurables are there. The test scores show it, everything else shows it. So what's to prevent us? I hear what you're saying on staff-wise, but there's got to be a hybrid model somewhere in there that says instead of making it 6 permanent, such as what we did at Whitcomb, where it was trimesters versus quarters, and that was the hybrid there, is, maybe it's a half. It's a combination of back and forth. I'm just trying to come up with different ideas myself, but that you're creating that team, because how else are we going to raise those numbers for everybody else that are not part of that?
There are lots of ways to address the achievement issues. I would say teaming is one of them. Mr. Riley and I have had several conversations about teaming structures. And we've been doing a great deal of conversation and research into teaming. Mr. Riley has done a lot of this already in previous years. And so he's been catching me up to speed, and I've been speaking to some of the mid-watch principals as well to see what other teaming pieces are out there. So this is still something that's on the burner. In terms of implementation for next year, I wouldn't be able to stand here and say, yep, we're teaming, or nope, we're not. But I can say definitively, we're definitely looking into it. I think there are a lot of, as I shared at the beginning of this presentation, if you will, about the schedule pilot, saying that there were, so as the scientist in me kind of bristles a little bit, because there were a lot of variables that we changed, and trying to see what the impact is from each of those, is that similarly I would look at it this way too, is that we're looking at the implementation of a new schedule, common planning time, longer instructional time periods, and an intervention and enrichment period as part of the schedule as well. So all of those are changes. in addition to addressing kind of core instructional needs within each of the classrooms and kind of overall, increase our support structures for our EL program as well as our special education program. So those are a lot of variables. And so this is not something that I want to just kind of like try and see what happens. But this is one that we're being a little bit more deliberate about and so figuring out what a real solution is going to be.
I will say personally, I'm glad to hear that it's part of the conversation. I think, we've seen the data. That was actually probably the first solid data we as a school committee have seen of the district. And the achievement numbers are, as a district, the most important thing. So when you've proven, and I know there's, not just one variable, all those different ones, I understand that. But I'm glad to hear that it's being considered because we gotta start somewhere.
Yep. Because we're also doing stuff at the other end too with QCC and pathways and partnerships and programming.
Right, but but just as the STEM model currently has evolved from the teaming in 9th and 10th and then blossoming out.
Yep.
It's that, as you said, they grow as they get older.
Yes.
So things can change at the
Right.
other end, so.
Sure.
I want to just piggyback on something you said, except I disagree with you. I think actually opening the whole middle school up to STEAM and having all the students participating in project-based learning, I would think possibly we'd see more kids interested in going into STEM because they see the value in the project-based learning. So I guess my question would be, if we do see a trend ticking upward, are you thinking about ways to integrate more project-based learning in the non-STEM classes?
That's part of the conversation as well.
Because we know
Again, a lot
that
of that
it's
comes down to
very-
the same piece that I mentioned before, which is about common planning time. So the fundamental structure of a high school is to provide choices for kids and to give them options, and progressively they get more choices as they proceed through the system. So by implementing more project-based learning, which means you're creating more interdisciplinary teaming and conversations, you have to provide interdisciplinary time.
Exactly.
And so it's very difficult when you get into scheduling and looking at common planning, you don't often get to schedule both common planning. And so I say that in terms of horizontally and vertically. So if I want to take all of my Algebra 1 teachers and have them free a certain period so that they can meet, it's very difficult to also make all of my grade 9 teachers available during that same period. Because then I have to find a home for those 300 students to go in different
Just put
levels
them
and
in that
different
pen.
courses. Right. Easy peasy. Right. That'd be great.
That big gym.
Right. And so it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And so that's the thing, is that you have to pick and choose what needs the most work. And so that's where this year with piloting common planning, we've chosen to stay within the course as opposed to within the grade level.
Sorry, and then feeding off of that, it just seems like we need to continue, though, communicating about project-based learning is really the push behind STEM, not necessarily engineering.
Correct.
Because unfortunately, I think there is a huge misnomer, not only within the kids, but as well with our parents, that aren't necessarily grasping that it's really just not about engineering as much as it is bringing groups of kids together in interdisciplinary ways to have them learn together.
Correct.
And that is something which I have to say, I have had multiple conversations with my own family around the dinner table for years, trying to make sure that they were getting, no, this is just not about engineering.
Right.
Right? And unfortunately, I do think because this has been such a huge shift, and engineering has been that kind of buzzword, that's been what is picked up upon,
Yep.
not necessarily how much project-based learning and grouping and teaming and having to collaborate with somebody who doesn't necessarily do their part, and this one that does, and a language difference, but having to work through it, and those incredible challenges that can really bring wonderful knowledge to students as well as to parents. And I think we need to do a really, much better job on a constant basis of that kind of communication.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I mean, engineering becomes in a weird way, the hook, if you will, because that's the impetus for the process as well as the project, typically. And so that's where, in essence, it gets emphasized as the project basis. But you can organize projects around almost anything. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do that. Yeah, of course.
Circulatory system.
Right. Yep. It's just more of making the learning continuous across different places. That way kids get to repeatedly see the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I think the more we advance as the kids are getting into more of these career pathways and all that kind of, one of the things that I really felt as a parent of a student going through STEM was I didn't really feel it was only about the engineering. Right. I thought they were learning skills that are applicable really in every kind of company or business or academia that you go into. Everybody works in teams now.
And
you have to learn how to work with each other.
No greater example than today's science and engineering fair of this, because I spent a good 2 hours there, and there were a multitude of different kinds of projects. And I have to say, over the years, while the numbers were smaller, the quality of the projects and the poise and the presentation and the interdisciplinary aspects of the projects were amazing. There were 10 groups of 10th grade STEM students who created outdoor learning spaces. That was their task for the year. And they asked me to judge these, and they asked at the beginning of the year, would it be possible to bring some of these to school committee and perhaps build one of these? So I am bringing forth three groups for you to look at, with perhaps a plan to build one of these outdoor learning spaces. But each and every one of those students, I asked the question, what have you learned from this? What's your favorite part of STEM? And it was, the answers have over the years grown increasingly more sophisticated and increasingly more pointed and targeted to the preparation for college and career. So again, quantity-wise, there weren't not as many as previous years, but intentional learning was abundant in all aspects.
Sure.
You're free.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Principal
Have a great night.
Clary. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Moving on. No discussions, no communications. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I mentioned earlier the District Improvement Plan review. The District Improvement Plan is in need of review, as it was benchmarked out only until 2017. In this plan, as you know, we spoke about it tonight, it should be the driving beacon for all of our school improvement plans. It should be something that we look at, not just a plan that's put away in a closet or in a drawer. And one of our goals is to streamline it and make it a little bit more user-friendly. We felt that we were perhaps overzealous last time. It's a little bit lengthy. So we're starting the work on March 15th at our administrative dinner meeting, and I've reached out to folks who participated in the first go-around and have slotted them on committees. I've also reached out to some parents on District Parent Council, and there were 3 school committee members who accepted their re-invitation to participate on committees again. Mrs. Matthews will co-chair Leadership and Governance, Mrs. Hennessy will serve on Human Resources and Professional Development, and Mrs. Bowden-Hedinger will serve on Student Support. We will also slot in the administrators who regularly meet at this time into committees that make sense for them. So the intent is on the night of the 15th to start the work in a good 2-hour chunk. by reviewing the current document and beginning to populate and think about what we need to do moving forward. I'd also like to hope that people would get together, one more time in their committees, be it virtually or in person, and then one more time coming together as a whole, reviewing to make sure that there are no inconsistencies and that it flows, with a presentation to school committee for approval in June. And I've listed the 6 standard committees and the co-chairs. I won't go ahead and read those, but we're very excited to get started with the work. I've also included in your packet the highlights of the Massachusetts Every Student Succeeds Act, now known as ESSA. DESE has posted this draft of a consolidated plan under the federal ESSA, and it welcomes feedback until the 9th of March. When the public comment period ends, it's expected that they will submit this present plan with any tweaks that need to be made based on the feedback to the U.S. Department of Education for approval in early April. I've included the executive summary. The actual document itself is 100 pages long. It's very dense. The executive summary is not something I'm going to go over with you point by point, but there are a few. But there are a couple of highlights I would like to point out, and that is on page 1, it talks about the goal of the Massachusetts public education system is to prepare all students for success after high school. We just referenced that in terms of the work we're doing with our preparation, our project-based learning and collaboration. So the 5 strategies that they are employing are listed here on page 1: strengthen standards, curriculum, instruction, and assessments, promote educator development, support social emotional learning, health, and safety, turn around the lowest performing districts and schools, and use technology and data to support student learning. We are at varying degrees making strides in all of these areas. I would point specifically to targeted goal number 5, where we've really beefed up our use of technology in the district, not only as a tool, in central office and an organizing tool, but also in our schools with the advent of the technology director and the ITSs. And the data, we've made great inroads with the use of Edwin Analytics, the benchmarking, early warning indicators, and the use of the student data dashboards that all of our staff are presented 4 times a year. So moving on, it does talk a lot about the successes so far in relationship to the National Assessment of Educational Progress and the PISA tests. However, the challenges are really those that we know quite well. Chronic absenteeism, student overall performance may be strong compared to other states and nations, but in our own state of Massachusetts, there are some grades, and there are some grade spans that are not showing improvement, specifically proficiency in grade 3 reading, and as well our middle grades, specifically grade 6 mathematics. The one that is the most concerning to me, and it shows a huge disconnect with higher ed, is the fact that more than 1/3 of our high school graduates from public high schools take at least one remedial course in college. That is a huge disconnect, and I really feel that some of the work that we've been doing with Dan appearing in front of the joint board and those visitors coming to see us next week, and I alerted you of all of that in case you want to put it on your calendar, is that we are trying to close that gap, but the gap is significant, certainly. A couple of other things I wanted to talk about on page 9 is some of the status for all students and gap closing for high-need students, the proposed indicators that they're looking at. The core measures are very similar. Those are things that you've seen before, but the additional measures, I think, bear a lot of notice because this is where the state is going. Chronic student absenteeism will now be something that we're going to look at very closely. Access to the arts, school climate, breadth of curriculum, grade 9 course passing, because of course passing grade 9 course work gives you a good indicator of the rest of your progress throughout the rest of your high school career. So those are some of the things we're looking at through the ESSA plan. And one other significant change, if this is passed, is that the district's level would be determined by the overall performance of all of the students in the aggregate, not by the level of the lowest performing school as it currently is. So I like that. I think it's about time. I'm looking forward to some of these changes that ESSA will bring to us. I think it's a very, very thoughtful plan. I confess to not having read the whole thing. The executive summary is fine for me. And finally, I wanted to end with the Dr. Barry Walsh event that we have been publicizing quite notably. This is tomorrow night at Marlborough High School, and the topic is the development tasks of adolescents and how to know if your child is having difficulties. This is really shining a light on a lot of the social emotional work that we've been doing in the district, specifically with the Bridge Training Institute. We're working with them to train our staff on topics of destructive behaviors and suicide. So I'm hoping to see many of you there tomorrow night. I believe it's in the Science Lecture Hall, and you'll note that the flyer, as well as my report, sports the new logo. And we've had a few glitches with the rollout of the website, but overall, things have gone very well. We're pleased with the work, and Raina and I are meeting almost daily, updating each other on the progress. And the next phase is to roll out some of the branding in terms of letterhead, and you'll see behind us is an outdated logo. So there are a lot of facets of the rebranding of our district in terms of the logo that will need to take place, but it's an exciting opportunity for us. That concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Question? Mrs. Matthews?
Okay.
No?
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Ms. Geary. Bet you didn't think you'd have to wait till 9:30.
I know, it's about
Sorry.
past my bedtime. And I'm not joking. Okay, just to give you a few updates from the Office of Special Education. I feel like this is really as you know, the Massachusetts Department of Education was in January for the mid-cycle review. We have not yet received our report back. A few areas that they did ask questions about, and I do think we might get some areas where they want us to continue to focus on, would be looking at translations and how translations are done. It's something we have been in constant communication with you about and the district as far as getting documents translated. We still have backlog, and it does impact the special education documents as when you get through more extensive reports and information and data. Even prior to them even noting that, Mr. Bergeron and I were already working with Raina on creating a plan to look into that right now with some outside agencies that we've been researching, and we are in the process of that right now to help us, because the level of translations and the number of documents that need to be translated is very extensive when you get into special education and any reports that are completed and IEP documents. As Raina has learned quickly through this process, because some packets may be 30-plus pages of information that needs to be translated. Another area which I think they're going to be looking at too, is how we provide services to students at the high school when we're looking at vocational opportunities, not specifically students in our postgraduate program for students with intensive disabilities, but looking at for students with mild to moderate disabilities and how we support them through that. That's something we got marked on. It's not just a special education area, but also covers over to the civil rights area. Even though this wasn't a review on civil rights, it was specifically special ed. They did bring that up as far as questioning of what that looks like right now, and they wanted more documentation. So that's another area that I think that they want to see continued improvement on. There has been improvement, but we still need to continue to grow in that area to ensure all students have access. Recently, we've been working with Tom Platty. We've been updating the technology in a lot of the special education classrooms. We've swapped out the LCD, the Eno boards for LCD smart boards. So the boards have the smart board technology, but they have also touch screen capabilities. The prior boards were pens, which a lot of our students had difficulties with because of fine motor challenges. So in many of our classrooms for students who were fine motor might be an issue, and or if students require different heights due to wheelchair access or heights of students, we have upgraded the boards to touch screens, which we're very excited about. Few glitches during implementation, but Tom Platty's been on top of them to make sure anything that was a challenge has been tweaked out, and so hopefully we'll get that all ironed out in the next couple weeks. Just, we also ordered, and I think because I was supposed to be in here a while back to present, they're called 3-to-1 carts. They were in here, so they were going to leave them, and obviously they've rolled them out. But they're mini LCD projectors too. 4 of them have been ordered for the Early Childhood Center that can project on the floor. They can project on the screen, and they can also, and they're all touch screen and pen technology for students. So the students at the ECC have access to them, and it's more. Students can get more involved kinesthetically and move around, and they can do activities on the floor with the students also, and the boards. The curriculum team that has been continuing to work to look at the programming for the curriculum for the students in the sub-separate programs from ECC elementary to middle school. They've been doing a lot of work and kind of bringing everything together. They've been looking at the pilot for Teachtown for the social pragmatic technology and for the academic pieces of that, and the feedback has been very positive throughout this year. This is our pilot year. We're going to be having another meeting in the next couple weeks, and it looks like we're going to renew for a 3-year subscription for Teachtown for the students and the programs, which will be great. It only goes up to age 11? Okay, cognitive level 10. Okay. Brian Zyman has been helping to facilitate the curriculum team and has been helping to facilitate the organization of Teachtown, so we are very grateful for his support there. There was a sample of some of the work that one of our classrooms had done, and I just realized it wasn't put in the packet when I was sitting there, so I will get that to you so you can see. It's just a sample of how the teachers are utilizing technology and creating resources and sharing information with parents in the community. So I apologize for not having that in there. I will get that to you. Some special updates outside of the special education office. One thing we've created recently that began in January, we created a program called Steps to Success. This was a partnership with the special education office and in collaboration with Mary Murphy and the elementary principals. We created an after-school program as a pilot for 2 days a week for 6 weeks, so 12 days total, to see if this would benefit our students in grades 3 to 4, and really looking at our students who are at that cusp. They really need that extra support academically, and the focus of this Step Success was reading. We had extra grant money, well, not extra grant money, but because we are a district accountability status, we have to use a portion of our 240 grant to really focus on student achievement. So I took I brought that to the attention of the team and really discussed how I wanted to really look at how can we address and increase students' needs so they don't get referred for special education, and we can kind of reduce the numbers of students being referred by giving them the additional support in that area prior to referral. So it was focused on grades 3 to 4 and really focusing on study and organization for those students. And they were focused on pre and post data. They should be finishing up this week. One school extended 1 extra week due to some snow days and some other things that got in the way. And we're going to be meeting to go through the data and with the individuals that were organizing the program to see how it went and to get people's feedback to see if this is something we can continue for next year. We also, using grant money, purchased Second Step curriculum training kits. Second Step is a social skills curriculum for students. As you probably know, we've kind of haven't been consistent in what we've been using. We have a little bit of responsive classroom. We have a little bit of Second Step. And the Second Step hasn't actually been utilized recently, and kits that we did have are extremely outdated and not at all appropriate at this time anymore with the changes we have in our district. So we've ordered training kits for the elementary levels, and with that we also, and the early childhood center, and we've also ordered with that the bullying prevention training kit for each building. So with the training kits, the building principals will be moving forward and looking at plans to start training teams, and Mary Murphy and I are going to work together to try to figure out how we can increase the number of kits we have, specifically not training kits, for the elementary levels. As you probably have heard already, it's been a while, we were awarded the Metro West grant again this year for an additional $108,000 to be dispersed over 2 years for the transition programs at the Wickham Middle Schools. This will help cover the cost of the clinical coordinator and a few other additional fees. And as we discussed the first time when we got the grant last year, it's a slide, kind of slides backwards for the grant funding. So each year it kind of steps back a little bit as far as the funding that we do receive. I think it's important to note though, because we were on a 1-year grant last year, they did let us up the first year of this year for the whole 3 years. I'm not sure if I explained that well, but technically it's supposed to go, first year and then go down, but because we only had 1 year and then we had to reapply, our second year they let us apply for a little bit more since our grant was written for a lower cost position for year 1 originally, and we changed the structure. Some professional development that's happened recently. We sent Lisa Deeker, co-teaching, and UDL in the classroom was at Accept Collaborative in I think it was Framingham or Natick. We sent teams from the middle school, the high school, to that, and also from the Kane Elementary School. And a few of the building administrators also attended that. This is similar training we've sent curriculum directors in the past. So it's really to help people kind of continue the conversations of where we need to move to improve our inclusive environments at the school buildings. Jessica Padula from Speech and Language Specialties has been working with the Jarwick School over the course of the year, really working on social thinking training with not just special education, but for the entire building. So for all staff at the Jarwick School, they've gone through training with Jessica Padula. They've had ongoing professional development throughout the year. They're going to have another half day next week on March 9th. And Jessica Padula has also gone in and modeled lessons and observed within the building over the course of the year. Kane School also tapped into this, and they have also had a half-day professional development, not as intensive as Jarwick. And they're also now tapping into Jessica Padula to come help with some modeling too also. So we're very grateful to have Jessica Padula available to help us with the social thinking. It really helps with creating a common language across the building, which again is also good for when you're looking at social emotional learning with those students, and for students to be able to use appropriate language and coping skills when out in the community. And I think, any questions on that specifically?
Can I work back on some of the things earlier in the report? Okay. So the Steps to Success, about how many kids were involved in that program?
Up to 40 kids at each elementary building.
Up to 40 kids. And how were they selected?
The teams at the buildings looked at certain scores. They chose groups of students that really needed the extra support in that reading area, and they went through and chose kids. They used their MTSS data, so they used the data scores that they'd been collecting on students. So they're with the DRA data, the FastBridge data, the classroom data. The buildings have data teams that are constantly looking at the data now. So with using the data that they have and speaking with the individuals involved, they went through that and determined individuals for the after-school program. And being that it was a starting program, they didn't want to go too big, or they wanted to keep it within a certain population of students within a certain realm as scores, so that it would be manageable for the pilot to see how it went.
Right. How is this working with, or maybe not, with some of our Title I money that often is earmarked towards reading and ELA? I'm just curious, are they working in tandem together, or no, we're just not doing it that way? And I'm sorry, because I'm asking, I know Mary's not here, but
It's okay.
like,
Title I money, that's really loud.
that
Sorry.
was really loud. You were just really strong. We hadn't heard from you tonight.
A lot of the Title I money is earmarked for summer programs, so they're not necessarily competing. A lot of the Title I and Title III are both earmarked to prevent the summer decline for students. We don't want the achievement gap to increase during the summer, so we hold specific Title I and Title III camps during that period, whereas this is more of a school year.
Yeah.
In the past, we've also, through operating budget, done programs like this. This is from a grant, but as you know, we also do like the Science Boost Camp. In the past, we did MCAS boot camps, all that types of things. So they don't necessarily compete with each other.
Yeah. No, I just know that, and this hasn't been for a while, but in the past, there have been some Title I money that sometimes was used for like some after-school programming or enrichment programming of some sort at the elementary levels. And I think only certain schools at that point were qualifying for that support. So I just was kind of curious where that was either, overlapping or not or whatever. And then with the second step training kits, curriculum training kits. So you mentioned the responsive classroom. I guess my question is, are we just going to let things kind of continue of having second step and responsive classroom? Are we going to try and consolidate so schools are kind of all using this same programming? What's kind of happening with that?
So I think Mary can speak to that more specifically because she knows more about the responsive classroom and how it has been working in the plan. I know there's pockets of it that are going on, and there's certain areas that individuals are more trained. So that's a question when Mary returns we can bring to her.
Okay.
As far as second step, it was Mary worked with the team as far as what they would, moving forward, what would it be as far as curriculum to implement as a social skills curriculum and to have that's consistent for the students that would really support the social emotional learning for students at that age. And second step was the one that they determined that they'd want to focus on because it's what second step does is different than what responsive classroom does. And Mary can speak more to that specifically.
Okay. That'd be helpful because then it would kind of tie into some of the behavioral issues that were mentioned in the NEAS report for Whitcomb, and how can that help on bridging some of that gap, if you will?
Well, and I think looking at some of that too, when you're looking at, PBIS at the middle school is all looking at the tier 1, 2, and 3 that they're building at the middle school should also help support some of the behavioral challenges that they're having.
Yeah. And I guess my only other comment then was relative to Jessica Petula that you mentioned had primarily done a lot of her work over at Jarrick and then now kind of some at Kane. Again, I think it speaks to the consistency that we need to make sure that, she and or that philosophy of social thinking is moving forward at Richard too, so we're not having just pockets and pockets here and not really understanding that we are moving them all up.
No, and that's not our intention. So the Jarwick was the target due to the population of students moving from Richard School from the Pathways program over to Jarwick. So that was the plan. We to start the social thinking in that building to build the common language to support the changings in that building over the last couple of years. Because due to competing PD events happening, it's always hard to get everyone on board at once and do everything. Even with Kane, it was something that the principal really asked if she could squeeze in to start this year, and even then, it's not as extensive as Jarwick. I have already been in conversation with the principal at Richard School and with Mary about meeting to plan about having conversations for the Richard School for next year, so that we can begin the work there. So and I think it's important to note too, there are teams at each elementary school did go to a social thinking training earlier this year through the Michelle Garcia Winter.
Okay, thank you.
Winter, Michelle Garcia Winter, sorry. Any other questions? So before I step down, I just want to give you some bittersweet news. I am been offered a position in another district closer to my home. This was a difficult decision for me, but due to personal reasons, I really do need to find a job that's closer to where I live. Currently, my commute has been getting longer and longer. So I just wanted to inform you that I will be putting in my resignation to Superintendent Grulich this week. I am very grateful and thankful for working here in Marlborough and all the work that we've done. I think we've started a good path and started building a good foundation. There's still work to be done, which is why it's even harder for me to leave. But I do feel that the building of the foundations that have started are going to continue to grow and be in the best interest of the students and the community here in Marlborough.
Sad for us, but thank you for all the hard work you've done
Thank you for
since
everything.
you've been with us.
I'll be here till the end of the year, don't worry.
Yeah, okay, good.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Acceptance of minutes.
A motion to accept, I did receive some feedback on some typographical issues that I will correct, but motion to accept as amended.
Motion made and seconded to accept with amendments. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Public participation. Public participation.
They all left.
Is anyone awake? Seeing none. Action items. Proposed FY18 MPS organizational chart.
Thank you. As per policy 3.300, administrative organization plan, which states that the committee should approve the lines of authority in a chart that represents direct authority and responsibility annually. I'm not sure we've done this annually, and there are just a few changes on this chart. So I've provided a visual representation of my proposed changes for FY18, and I would ask that the school committee have a chance to ask clarifying questions prior to approving this visual representation of this policy. A couple of thoughts around why this has been important to me, and that is I feel that over the past few years, we've become awfully top-heavy at central office and at administration. The impetus here is not necessarily budgetary. It is more strategic in terms of the evaluative responsibilities and the responsibilities that correlate more to the needs of our students more closely. However, that being said, if we were to implement everything here as well as what I'm calling kind of a tier 2, maybe a look at language, supervisory role, and some other things down the road, it would net us some savings. So starting at the top, my proposal is that we look at a more traditional structure. We've had some input from our friend Tony Bent. We've had a workshop on this, looking at the more traditional structure of assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, which now, as much as we've appreciated the two roles, certainly a role that I've played over many years in several different names, that we now have a very structured and targeted support, disciplinary-wise, under the teaching and learning assistant superintendent to provide the help pre-K to 12. In terms of the assistant superintendent of finance and operations, again, in a district of this size, it's a little bit more of a conventional title, and we've outlined here some of the areas that person would be responsible for, and one of the changes that you may note here is the supervisor of information technology is in kind of that rosy color, and it seems to fit under this specific person because it is a shared role with the city, much like the custodial and well, the food service comes under that person as well. So one other thing I would draw your attention to is a bit of a marked change in terms of the Director of Student Services. So not only is it a different title, but it spreads a little bit more out from special education, Ms. Geary has talked about this for a while, about the need to align some other folks under here, school adjustment counselors' guidance as well, and specifically the supervisor of health services, pre-K, that is a typo there, it shouldn't be K, it should be pre-K to 12, to evaluate the nurses, because currently the person who holds this role is spending more and more of her time in administration, in coming up with professional development, in attending meetings, and not tending to students one-on-one per se. So that is a recommendation. And the educational team leaders seems like a new title, but that is team chairs, and we've talked a lot with Ms. Geary about this, and this is a model that is used in other districts. Again, the details of exact roles and responsibilities would need to be ironed out. We have already sent a letter with an intent that we were presenting this evening to sit down and talk about the implications of this with Unit A and Unit B. So certainly not all of those fine details are ironed out at this point, and some of the things that Heather and I have talked about are how to structure those educational team leader roles, how much of the time should be spent evaluating. You certainly can't spend a great deal of time, as you would, say, in the far left, with all of those supervisors, because their primary role is running the meetings, the team meetings. So while some details need to be worked out, in very broad strokes, the recommendation is that those roles be moved to Unit B and be given an evaluative role as well. To the far left, in green as well, you see Supervisor of Visual Arts, K-12, Supervisor of Music, K-12, and Supervisor of Wellness, K-12. It has become apparent through a lot of conversation that those specific disciplines would benefit greatly from an evaluative eye from someone who is trained in those disciplines. The way other districts do this kind of a split is allow them to teach maybe one or two and evaluate. That has not been our model here. Unit B has been fairly solid in terms of no teaching in Unit B and Unit A. Conversely, no evaluation of people in the same bargaining unit. So that is my recommendation. Some of these titles, I looked in the recognition clause in Unit B specifically, because we would be recommending that these in green be moved into Unit B. Some would need to be added into the recognition clause, but my suggestion is that we keep assistant superintendents, the two at the top, director of student services, and then the others would be called supervisors. I think we've gotten lost in some nomenclature here of executive directors and so on and so forth. This seems to be a little cleaner. Quite honestly, the certification is called supervisor director anyway, so those are almost used synonymously. So that is my recommendation, putting this forward for your approval. Welcome any questions.
What's the pleasure? Should we do questions or vote and then do questions during?
I think we need to I personally, I'm not ready to vote on this yet.
Okay.
So, questions?
Yes.
So, and I want to thank you for, I know Ms. Hennessy sent questions and I sent questions, and I appreciate your response.
Mm-hmm.
And having looked this over now, I guess I'm starting to stumble on, and I say stumble only because having digested it a little bit more, and I'm going to preface it by saying, obviously, all of this has to be impact bargained.
Absolutely.
And in any reshuffling. But one of the concerns that I have, while I'm concerned about caseloads of evaluator to evaluatees, and I've said it publicly before, I'm very concerned with taking anybody out of the classroom. And while these roles these are our model teachers for these supervisor positions that I have a hard time, or in any position, those are the ones you want there. They're also the ones that, without being crude about it, are least measurable. They don't impact our achievement. They round the child out, but they don't impact our achievement. And where are we going to get the most bang for our buck? Are we going to get it in another reading specialist, another math specialist, another EL support? Where are our areas that we can measure the success of the kids in the district? Now, I'm not saying that people aren't overworked right now with evaluations. I have talked to some people in some other districts, and you were all party to the modeling of evaluations, and we were the forefront in the state. And I know A and B will never cross. I would love to see a hybrid. I know it's not going to happen. But I also know that there have been changes to one of the things, and there have been changes to the model on how evaluation can be supported within the group. So there are other ways to do it that don't need to happen here in the conversation, but that can alleviate what you're trying to accomplish as far as caseload. I go back to that, as I said, the touchy-feeliness. How do we make sure that the kids are getting what we have to give them? And these roles, while yes, I'd love to see that layer, they're going to lose the impact that we're taking them out of the classroom, and they're already on a limited schedule because of their supervisory role or team chair or whatever they're called in their role. So I'm struggling a little bit with this. I understand the structure under student services. I fully support the involvement of counseling and guidance and that whole, K to 12 part of it. And nursing, I think, is a no-brainer. I guess one of the questions, and I don't know if you can answer this on the team chairs or the new educational team leader, how many people are we talking about?
We are talking about 8, Heather? I don't have all the documents with me. 8, Lauren?
5, 6,
And
7,
Christine?
8. Should be 8, yeah.
8.
8,
There's one in
including
each
out
elementary.
of district. 8 is
ECC.
included in there. 8.
8.
8.
There isn't a separate one for ECC?
That's
There's 2 at the middle and 2
included.
at the high, right?
1 at the
Only
high.
1 at the high.
It's 8.
8.
Right. It's 8, including out of district and ECC. 8 package.
Okay. I don't know, that's just where I'm starting to, we struggled when we added the reading specialists at the elementary, and we struggled to find the money to do that. And I think we're starting to see the improvement of having those positions. And I keep hearing the need for more. And I mean, Rupal can tell us, and we ran into her last week while I was at the middle school, the numbers of EL students were, twice as many as last year? So what are we doing to support that?
Well, that's preview of coming attractions. That's March
that's
9th. I mean, of our.
No, I know, I know, but I'm
Right.
saying it's that's starting to concern me a little bit, is
Agreed.
those, and, and
Agreed.
Mr. Daniels brought up the issue about substitutes. There's many different things going into that are we gonna, how do we address the continuum of education when we have no subs to put in, teachers that aren't there, and so on?
So part of what I've entertained is the fact that these people can, and I don't think it's against, the protocol of not teaching if you're in B, to help out in subbing a little bit and helping out with especially in the music area, taking a group here and there when someone is not, it's not co-teaching, modeling. I think that their impact may not be measured in school accountability data, but the impact will be measured immeasurably because they don't get out as they, right now they really are home-based at the high school. They teach 2 classes there, and they're immersed there in the high school. They don't spread out in the district the way they should, and they will admit that.
Well, but is that something that, in looking at humanities as a broader area, can't fall under?
So the current supervisor of humanities is already English and history, and this person currently evaluates part English, part history, and the others fall to the administrators at the secondary level. So, we've also had the suggestion of putting, world language under there. I mean, I'm not sure how much you can put under humanities, and then it becomes, just let the principals and assistant principals. Because we had also toyed with, you'll remember Superintendent Langlois talked about a supervisor of arts, one role. And we talked about that, and I think it was Mary Murphy who came up with the notion that, it's hard to serve both masters. At one point in my career, I was asked to think about being the ELL and world language coordinator. That made no sense, right? Especially now, it would make no sense. It's just become too big. So splitting it makes sense because, we don't want people to feel like we're cutting into the music program any more than, we have for certain reasons that we all know for the academic core. And so giving each their own place seemed to make some sense rather than combining the two.
Well, I'm going to be the really bad one and throw the elephant in the room out there. We're a city that's been well-funded. We've gotten our funding generously from the city. Yes. But when times are tough and cuts have to be made, where are the first cuts going to be? And unfortunately, historically, and I'm not saying that this is nothing in writing, but historically, it's your arts, your music, your wellness programs. They're your first things to go. And I know, obviously,
wellness can't now because it's a mandate, right?
It's always been a mandate, but it's been ignored.
We're enforcing the mandate now, so
yes. Well, yeah, and right, and if it goes back to the states, well, everybody just carry a jump rope and that'll be PE. But, sorry. But my point being that I don't want to set us up for something that may never come to fruition, but it also may be the first thing to go. So, I've said my piece.
Okay. May I ask a clarifying question? Are you talking about just those 3, Mrs. Matthews, or
no? I'm
all of the 3, all of the green?
The supervisor of health services, that one I understand because of the complexity of it. The team chairs, I'm still trying to understand what a team chair is. So, could you please?
Yeah,
please?
And I think Heather would. We've talked a lot about this. Heather's drawn up a plan, a roadmap. So I'm going to let them speak to this.
So I'm Christine Dolan. I am currently the out-of-district coordinator. I've been a team chair for 2-3 years prior to this at Whitcomb School, special ed teacher before that. So I've been with the public school system for a while now as a parent and a teacher. As a team chair, as it current the current model, our primary responsibility is to run IEP meetings, run team meetings, as well as to ensure the implementation of those IEPs. The majority of our day is spent writing IEPs, running the meetings, reading documents, looking at testing, making sure that we are meeting all of our eligibility requirements, we're classifying children appropriately. So we've got a lot of that. We are also the first person that our special ed teachers come to when there's an issue. So if there's, this student is not doing well in class, they're going to come to the team chair. If there's a behavioral problem in class, often the first person they come to is the team chair. We're kind of their first line to run things by us, and then they might move on. We might say, this is something for this, bring to Mr. Daniels, bring to the SPED supervisor. So we're already doing some administrative duties in that we are scheduling, we are have been making MCAS groups, we are often the guidance counselor because we'll say, this student needs to be transitioned to this class. We're already doing a lot of the administrative duties. I think this would more make it official.
And not servicing
And
students, correct?
We do not service students.
Which is?
No.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a Unit A position, not servicing students.
Correct. We don't, no, the ways in which we service students is to ensure the implementation of programs and of their IEP, to make sure that they are receiving the services from the teachers, from the related service providers, from all of those, counselors, all of those things, to ensure that implementation. So although we deal with students, it's often not directly.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, anything else?
Better understanding.
That's fine. Anything else I can answer that would help you better understand that?
I just have a question. Is that the same so you're one of the 8 proposed educational team leaders. So or is that what all of you do? Are some team leaders interacting, like teaching children?
No, none of us currently teach children. I mean, we're all dealing with our specific levels. So as an out of district, I'm going out into the different schools and collaborating with different outside schools. ECC obviously would be dealing a lot more with early intervention, things like that. So we each have our own little niche, but essentially, yes, we're all doing the same job.
And the difference between Unit A and Unit B is it would allow you to supervise.
And evaluate, yes.
In some way. That's what.
In some way.
It doesn't also allow them just to supervise, because they're in this almost pseudo-administrative role.
That's it,
What
right there.
happens is that, say there's a document, or, everything we do in special education is mandated under, we've got the IDEA, Massachusetts regulations, we have timelines, we have to abide by, we have to go by. And we have to really ensure that we are tight with that. When we have an IEP meeting, and then we have to write an IEP, our turnaround to get the IEP out to the families and translate it, we only have a certain number of days. So and the document isn't just written by the team chair. The team chair might do like maybe the overall, and one letter or certain components of it, but the teachers also have to input information. And so if the team chairs are put in difficult positions, because if they have individuals who are not inputting their information in within the timelines, or getting their reports done within the timelines, they're in a difficult position because they're not administrators. They can't really, they're chasing them down, but the teachers at the same time are, well, you're in my unit. So it gives them more leverage, thank you, it's late for me, to really help support the process, ensure compliance, and making sure we're doing what we need to be doing for students. Because right now, they don't have that leverage at the building levels, so either they seem like the bad Unit A person chasing people down, and people get frustrated with that, and also they provide the additional support to teachers as far as helping them learn how to write IEPs and or the process of Aspen and all of that for new teachers. So they already have the pseudo admin role, but the only thing is they don't have that leverage piece, and they're the ones that are when we talk about compliance and we look at timelines and we look at status reports, it's the team chair's status report, but yet they don't have the leverage to go really ensure it at times, and they really need that additional support.
Thank you.
So clarification then. When the team chair positions were created a number of years ago then, sounds like positions were created that actually should never have been like this. Is that fair assessment? If they are not having direct interaction with kids, sounds like we're talking about something that was created as more of an administrative role
and
anyway,
who was-
yet
when
was
was
put
it
in
created?
Unit A, correct?
It is common for smaller districts with low caseloads to possibly have it in Unit A, but a lot of districts are moving towards having it as a Unit B or a more administrative role because of the demands of the job and because it has grown so much over the course of the last 10 years. So I think as districts, the capacity increases in districts and the needs and support have grown, many districts have shifted to this model. But, you know, historically, these were in other districts also Unit A positions, teaching positions,
So
teaching positions.
How is this administrative workload, though, handled previously? I'm just trying to understand here from a tracking history then, how was that done? Because if I understood correctly, it was handled by the teachers, and the teachers then would pass the information, whether it be to the building principal or to the special education administrators, correct? So for IEPs, to make sure everything's being followed and all of the information that you're talking about, there wasn't that administrative role. How was it being handled previous to those positions then being created?
I wasn't here, so I can't speak to that.
Were you here that long?
When I was, what happens, I mean, I can speak to years ago when I was a teacher and, did we have team chairs? I think, usually I think what would happen, it would be on the liaison would end up doing it years ago, but I haven't, I can't even remember.
Back when I was a parent, many, many, many years ago, and
Because you're not anymore.
Not having a parent. Back when my kids
When your children
were
were-
evaluated many years ago. As I recall, from the parental side of things, the school psychologist was often the one that ran
That's what
the
my
team
memory
meetings.
is.
So that's what I'm trying
So,
to,
It was
you
the
know,
school psychologist.
From
And
the
where
best
the
of my
psychologist
recollection.
is in Unit A as well.
Right, it
So-
was the school psychologist that typically, and then as the special education referrals continue to grow, the number of referrals, at some point, school psychologists need their time to do testing.
And school psychologists don't go to school to get trained in the Massachusetts regulations, and that's also another challenge you have when you have those situations of school psychologists running meetings, because they're trained to test and look at and evaluate students and tease things out, but as far as when we look at compliance, Massachusetts regulations, IDEA, being able to navigate a situation at a meeting, if a meeting escalates and or if there seems to be a challenge at the meeting or determining those types of directions at meetings, the school psychologists they don't have the background in the laws and the regulations and what happens at DESI to help support that. We did have a few school psychologists that were called team chairs when I first arrived, but that has been changed.
And my reason that I asked for that history, or my reason of bringing this up, is because I think, you know, you were kind of touching upon it. I'm great with that upper level structure of going back to having the assistant superintendents and director of student services. That's something that's been more traditional. We've seen it across the state at many different school districts. So that makes complete sense. I get it. But when I look at having additional positions added in a supervisory role, not directly hands-on with the kids, I do get concerned about that number blossoming. And so that's my question, like in regards to 8 educational team leaders. That's a lot. Sorry, but it is, you know.
Building. Do you
Well,
realize? I get the number. It's,
get it.
It's 8 moving.
it's a-
That the MEA, and again, I'm not trying to, it's the history of it. It's been there, it's got to move there, that's going to change.
And then my
a lot
next-
of dynamics.
And my next thing is I was trying to bring up is that my concern is when we then look at our population across the board of our district, our EL numbers are raising dramatically. And our special education numbers are definitely there, so don't get me wrong, but it's not rising with the same growth pattern that we're seeing out of EL. right? So I'm trying to look at all of that and weigh all of that.
Just if this helps to, assuage your fears, and I hear you, of the 11.2 positions that we're looking to add in the budget, 9 of them are directly related to the population that you're speaking of.
Right.
And 2 of them being translators, but the rest are,
Which is basically for EL services too.
Well,
right?
exactly, but
Right.
and you'll hear more about this. I don't want to steal the thunder of the principals presenting, but they've been very thoughtful in their asks for the support for this population. So this isn't either or, I don't think, although I know that's always in your mind, thinking of, what if the bottom falls out and something happens, what will give?
It's not to interrupt you, but it's not, and I don't know if I'm cutting you off at all here, but
Go ahead.
I'm going to throw that bucket of worms out, which is how with the rise in the EL population, and not that I want to see Rupel switch from Unit A to Unit B, but what's the difference in a team chair, educational leader, and an EL coordinator at that point? There's no contact with children either, other than the evaluative.
So when we're looking at the IEP process, it's an extensive process, a lot of timelines, a lot of mandates. By law, we have to have an LEA at each team meeting that can determine allocating district funds at each IEP meeting that we have. Technically, it should be an administrator. Technically, we have our team chairs as those individuals. A lot of meetings, John will attend, or the supervisors will attend to help if it's a challenging meeting. What happens is if we do not have things in place with compliance and the processes, it can cost the district a significant amount of money.
And I'm not questioning, I'm not trying to make the special ed any smaller than it is. I'm just saying, how is the EL side of it not as important or as similar? Just the similarities. Yes, you have compliance time and there's money associated. And trust me, I'm sure at some point there's going to be funding that is grant related that deals with ELs as well, because if they can tie it to that, they will. So there's going to be mandates with that as well. So I just see the shift of positions that it is just blossoming. And I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be changed into an administrative. I'm just saying, what other worms, can of worms is it opening up for similarities of other positions? And obviously all this is going to have to be bargained anyhow. So it's a much bigger, broader conversation, but it's scaring the bejesus out of me right now. Sorry. I'm just being honest.
Can I ask, is it scaring you because we're not directing services to the most growing population, or that we are taking, some of our superior people and taking them away from kids? It's both of those.
It's all of the above. And I guess I'm going to say to what you were saying before about your starting comments about the administrative positions, right?
Yep.
I always get very fearful of adding in the administrative area, and I don't think you're adding it just because. So I'm not trying to at all. I'll head down that path. It's just a lot to weigh in, and I have to say I've continued to keep on looking at, and I know what you just said in regards to humanities, and it would be great if we could figure out how could we put some other things under there, but you go, well, but that's probably pretty heavy load already.
It's heavy already.
So, and that was one of my reasons of asking the questions earlier about the load of the evaluations was to really then comprehend that, because you want to have evaluations be so worthwhile. So to overload someone's, amount is not going to make it a worthwhile process.
Not worthwhile at all.
Right? I get it. And
it's also not worthwhile to dilute a person who is the supervisor of humanities into 3 or 4 other disciplines.
Right. And I get that. And so I'm not saying there's some optimal solution, and not my position to even offer up. I just look at it and I get fearful of putting too much money towards more administrative as opposed to the hands-on directly onto the kids. And so that's at least where I would say that I'm having a little bit of angst with, or how to make sure, and actually I shouldn't say how, are moving these positions, potentially going down the path of bargaining, will that have greater impact in the end, rather than money being placed elsewhere for direct services and keeping those people in their positions within Unit A?
Right. So-
And so that's, I think, what I'm grappling with at the
Ultimately,
moment.
this is a cost-saving plan, so there's that. Those people, and again, it's very hard to have this conversation. We're not starting a school from scratch, there are people in these roles. These people in these roles have all, we've had conversations. They have come, we have brought this up at our joint evaluation meetings, and Michelle has been part of that, and they have had separate conversations, many with me, many with their principals, and I believe with Unit A leadership about, if we can't evaluate, we're not feeling useful, not useful, but as efficient as we could, because again, back to the leverage piece that Heather and Christina brought up, you can't, it's hard to see someone in a classroom, a brand new teacher, and you model it, you try to coach it, but it doesn't always translate if you can't evaluate.
Well, and we've had, direct example would be the conversations we've had around wellness over the last couple of years,
Correct.
frankly.
Correct.
We went ahead and we moved forward with needing to meet Mass Core standards, going down the path where Mr. Langlois was very focused on us, removal of the sports waiver. We were going to have a whole revision to the wellness curriculum, yet we're still having issues because we don't have someone in a position that has the ability to necessarily make sure that's led and having dual certification and the whole thing, right? Like all of that bargaining has not necessarily
Has not taken place.
been
And
able
it
to happen.
Probably should have 2 years ago,
Right.
but that's okay.
And,
there.
right, and again, not pointing fingers, just trying to understand that
The progression.
it's we've got little issues, and right, and I want to make sure that if we're making this kind of change, that it's an effective change that can be followed up and not have wrongful impact within the classroom because of removing some of these folks into a position that they're not going to be able to teach, or,
Sorry, we're moving towards highly qualified teachers. You want the teachers, the main teacher in a classroom, to be the content area expert. In my opinion, you are not, to make these people a supervisor, they would be going in and evaluating people within their own content. So you're having a content area expert, so as a former math teacher, I'll just use math. So as a math teacher, I would rather have a math person evaluating me, looking at what, come in, if I didn't do a good job, come tell me, mentor me, model for me, rather than having someone that doesn't have expertise in my area. As the team chairs, we are the experts in our area. So going in and evaluating a special education classroom, we can give them tips. We can say, this is, I think the same holds true for the math area, for the science. You want a content area specialist to evaluate in order to provide that expertise.
And I don't think any of us are offering up that we're not looking at wanting to have content areas specific, not necessarily being a part of the evaluative process. I think, this really goes back to some of the bargaining conversations that really probably need to happen around how can we make sure that from a content specific standpoint, there is evaluation comments that are being utilized appropriately to better the whole process all around.
And I'm not pro or con either way.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I have no position in this. So.
What's the pleasure?
I'm hearing that the top of the chart is okay and that we're still under discussion with the bottom, because,
Well, I guess, I don't know if we, I don't know if we can bless anything.
Partially.
Technically, I mean, anything that has to be bargained can't be blessed, so we can,
Bless it for conversation?
yeah, I mean, we can,
Well, we can vote to approve it pending successful
Negotiation.
negotiations. I mean, if it doesn't go through and it isn't bargained, then you'll have to go to Plan B.
but we don't know what Plan B is either, so.
I mean, this is a proposal. Plan B would be, I mean, removing the green, right? And not,
No, because there could be hybrids of that, too.
okay, so we,
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to make a motion because my motion actually would be to table it until we can bargain it, but
Are there already plans for bargaining?
attempting.
letters have been sent of, as a courtesy, letting you know that, letting Unit A and Unit B know that this was going to be presented this evening with the intent to bargain. So, no dates have been set.
No dates.
No, no formal, no. Mhm. That being said, there's a position that soon will need to be posted, as we have heard this evening. So
Can we approve part of the chart and not the whole chart? I mean, the parts that we feel comfortable with?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the, from the
from the
Mark and Mary's positions, or the old positions, to the assistant superintendents and the change of a secondary, special education, I'm sorry, to director of student services, the top tier, as Maureen
light blue.
suggested. So the blue and up. Everything else stays status quo until further. So that's my motion.
Ooh,
But
I'd make an amendment on that and
Yeah.
allow for the red boxes that are in the almost far right column, to allow that to be removed.
Those are removals, yeah.
Those are removals.
the removals.
Bye-bye.
Boxes in the far right corner are the supervisor positions, so if it does not get approved that we have the educational team leaders, we will need to keep those positions to support the department. So I think that those go hand in hand. Those red boxes to be removed can only be removed if the team leaders are approved.
Well, we won't know that until we impact bargain anyway.
So then we can't, because those positions are being utilized. We'll need those positions if.
But the suggestion is not to remove them, but to perhaps not fill them if these were to come to fruition. There's a bit of a difference there, but, yeah.
Who's doing the evaluations now?
For the team chair, for the teachers, the supervisors at the middle school and high school, and the principals and other assistant principals, and at the building levels. And at the elementary levels, the evaluations are being done by the principals and assistant principals. And for the team chairs, John Fletcher, the assistant director, evaluates the team chairs.
Isn't the team chairs, they're in place now?
Mm-hmm.
And according to this, we would then just call them team leader instead of team chair, is that correct?
Calling them team
They're not
leaders
in
and
Unit B,
removing
though.
the
They'd be in Unit
I
supervisors.
B.
understand it, but what I'm saying is they exist, they're there, they're
Correct.
doing the job.
Correct.
Yep. So those
So
positions.
so the red boxes are not, like, if we hadn't filled the people that were gonna go in the green boxes, then I would agree.
Yes,
Why take the red
Yeah.
ones away when then you have nobody?
correct.
I would argue that if we took the red ones away, we would still have those people, they just wouldn't be called team
But then
leaders, they
there
would be
wouldn't be
called team
anybody-
chairs. And they would be in Unit A.
Anybody to
I mean,
evaluate?
Well, then you go
Unit A.
back to just what she just said as what's happening in the elementary school right now. At the elementary level, the
Principals
principals,
and
the building
assistant
principals
principals.
then take over the ownership of the evaluation, just like they are in the elementary schools.
And this goes back
top
to
of
our
everything.
So it
earlier
goes back
question
to the
of.
earlier question of
Who's got
who's
more
on
people?
first, like,
Yeah.
who's been doing
Are there
it?
people in each of those red boxes?
Yes. Yes. Those are positions. Those are current FTEs in the position. Those are the supervisor of special education at the middle school and the supervisor of special education at the high school.
I just know one of them moved to a different position, so I didn't know if that was backfilled.
It was filled.
Just to point, I know, Ms. Matthews, your point about adding 8 new administrators, technically the net gain would be 6 new administrators because 2 administrators would be removed.
Oh, I'm not talking about the financial part of it. And I appreciate that, yes, yes.
That wasn't, I don't know if that was discussed, and for someone like me who's colorblind, can't see that.
We shouldn't have used red and green.
Thank you for reminding us.
It would be plus
that,
10 if you would do the math. If the whole green and red situation were to pan out, it's a plus 10.
Should have been thinking about the colorblind.
Unit B.
So I'm
not ADA compliant.
going to suggest that you take back your amendment, just because if we do the top, nothing changes at the bottom right now. The positions are there.
I will just wind that on back then.
No, nothing, it doesn't eliminate or doesn't fill them either. It doesn't do anything with them.
Okay, I will remove that.
Retract your friendly
I will
amendment.
retract that amendment. I will say, though, I'm in full support of that change for down the road. I have no problems with that.
And what are we doing about the peach colored? I don't know what color that is.
The peach colored.
They're already there.
They're already there.
They're already there.
already
They're
there.
just organized in a more logical fashion.
Okay, so there are
It's not a
no
change in
changes.
position.
The only changes
Are the green,
are the green.
take away the reds,
Take
and
away-
the top tier.
Correct.
Take away the reds. We've got a problem
Okay,
with school committee.
so
Can't take away
is my,
Rose.
my understand, Rose, thank you.
Rose.
What did I say? Peach? I don't know.
Each.
Um,
Or John's just seeing gray.
So- Various shades of gray. Oh, that didn't come out right. All right, I'll retract that one.
Yeah, take that back.
Not here. So to clarify your motion.
My motion is blue and up.
Well, anything up is already, there isn't anything up.
Right.
Okay.
It's just the reclassifications of the,
Of the
Assistant
Council.
superintendent.
It's called the Superintendent Council.
Okay.
Shall we call it that? The
Superintendent
Let's go with that.
of
reclassification of the- we'll
teaching and
go with that.
learning, executive director, no.
No.
That one gets
No.
removed.
that one gets removed.
Assistant superintendent of finance and operations and
And the
director of student services.
So that's the clarifying motion.
Motion made and seconded to do that.
Yeah, don't worry, Julie, I got it.
Well, I'll help you with the English. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. So you get half of your deal.
I'm fine with half a pie. It's
Half
better
a
than no
pie.
pie at all.
Exactly.
And food sounds good right now, but where would you suggest we go with the green? So
We go with the conversation.
we go with a conversation in negotiations? Okay, perfect. And so we
Because I
will-
think it's, and
That's
correct me if
perfect.
I'm wrong,
That's perfect.
I think we need to know the comfort level of the.
Of course.
And ramifications.
Of course. So we will proceed with Unit A and Unit B conversations with the negotiation subcommittee. Okay, and when and if it becomes,
Oh, it would have to come back to the
it
full
would
committee.
come back if there were something
You
that,
can discuss it with them pending the approval of the committee.
Of the school.
afterwards.
Perfect.
But if you want to start by
perfect.
And then I would just ask that, just like we would with anything, that we, before it would actually, come here, we have some preliminary discussions to understand directionally where it's going.
Yes.
Like you
Makes
would with
sense?
policy, you bring it back. and-
Exactly.
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 Perfect. Thank you.
Good?
Perfect. All right.
Good.
Policy. Next, 9B, policy to be approved, coaches policy, 6.320. Mrs. Hennessy.
Thank you. So, coaches policy, you all have had. We brought it forward the last meeting for the first read. And just as a reminder, the change was on the second page under the length of coaching contracts. So it would just read as head coaches 1 year, as opposed to all of the other stuff after it. So if we are good with that, I'd like to make a motion to move forward as that amended.
Motion made and second to approve the revised coaches policy 6.320. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries. Guidelines for vocational technical education program. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. So I believe we had talked about this at a prior meeting. Deadlines are looming for application to a receiving district, as well as by April 1st, the need to approve comes back to the in-district or district of residence superintendent. The guidelines for vocational technical education program non-resident student tuition process ask on page 2, they don't mandate, but it's may, a school committee may adopt a policy designating a preferred vocational school for the purposes of non-resident tuition programs. I have provided you, I think you received it along with the warrant, with the guidance, which is a little bit dense, but and it seems somewhat silly, since we have a vocational school right here. However, we want to ensure that our students apply to that school prior to applying to any other vocational school. Now, if there is a program that is desired by the student that is not offered at our preferred vocational school, they do have the right under this guidance to apply and to be accepted, and we would then pay tuition as well as transportation. There are some ways in which the superintendent of the district, in-district residents can not approve that. I have had some instances this year already. So not that I'm trying to squelch anyone's hopes and dreams, but it does come with a significant price tag. So by designating, I'll say it, Assabet, as our vocational school, it's another layer, I think, of showing our due diligence to this policy. I'm sorry, to the guidelines. And with a voice approval this evening, I would then make a recommendation, and I've talked with Mrs. Hennessy about this at length, and we've actually researched, Mr. Bergeron found a policy in a district, a very simple policy designating the school as the preferred vocational school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I recall reading, and I didn't highlight it, which was really poor planning on my part because I can't find it now. There was something in there that I thought if the school was located in your town, it almost seemed like we didn't have to do this. I don't have a problem doing it because it's just a safety later. I mean, or maybe it had something to do with the fact that we already pay into the support of Assabet. Like if the school that you're designating as your preferred school, you are already a member of.
Which we are, yep.
There was something in here, but now I can't find it, so.
Mm-hmm. Really, it's a safeguard more than anything.
I don't
because there could be a situation where a student wants a specific program in a specific school that is, not here, that we would have to transport. But sometimes ninth graders are allowed to take a kind of a foundational course of study. So
according to this, it says unless it's one of those agricultural schools, because they are a 4-year program, as opposed to the traditional technical schools, if
Correct.
you're not allowed to do ninth grade in another school, you have to do it in your home school. That's what this says.
Correct. Yes.
Unless it's an agricultural school.
Yes.
That foundation year, you have to do in your
The
own.
exploratory foundation.
Ms. Bodenhedger?
Yes, ma'am.
So that was one of the reasons why when we were discussing this, because this initially came up in policy, and we realized that we probably could not move forward quick enough to actually execute a policy following our guidelines of needing to create the policy, even if we're using a template, going through a first read, which is one meeting, and then
Because it's March 15th.
right, and we need to go ahead and do something because, as I had said to Ms. Grulich, I felt like it was imperative that it was not just a superintendent decision, that this was something from a school committee standpoint that we were in support of that designation. I think to your point that you were just alluding to about the ninth grade year, how ASPED is structured, and most of the VOTECs are structured, that it's supposed to be an exploratory to make sure that you're having the foundation. That was one of the reasons that it seemed best to bring it forward, have the discussion here, we make the designation, and then we will go back and do a policy. That way, the school committee has put forth support of what our VOTEC school is. We're supporting the regular ninth grade foundational study, and if a child so chooses to go down the path of a tech school, we have one right here that can support that need, and that way the superintendent also had, our perspective and support of what the school, and it was verbally stated.
With respect to verbally, I did reach out to some colleagues who run some of these schools, and I asked, does it have to be a policy? Because they keep using may throughout, and you may actually even designate several preferred vocational schools. I did get some very good advice from one superintendent of a vocational school saying a voice approval would be sufficient, especially given our situation where we're, as you've already mentioned, so closely aligned with ASABED. As long as there was something reflected in minutes that I could look back to if a situation came up that I needed it.
So I would like to make an emotion that we designate Assabet Valley Regional, no, it's just Assabet Valley Technical High School as our designated vocational school at this point. And if a policy is necessary, that a policy will be enacted, but our motion is that we make the designation to support the district and the superintendent.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, please. I feel the need to say that this is a bigger issue that maybe we bring up at mask next year, which is going to be a difficult decision to have, or just a difficult discussion. But maybe we have one of the, what's the thingies? The things we vote on each year.
The proposals? Or
Proposals.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I personally think is kind of bizarre in the way the state handles this is every school district has to designate choice or no each year, under school choice.
Yep.
If you are a school choice district and you choose to accept children from out of your own city or town, you receive the funding for their tuition, but it is not the responsibility of the sending district to transport the child.
Correct.
But under vocational, not only do we have to pay the tuition, we have to pay for transportation. And as you said, there are 4 agricultural schools in the state.
Yeah, that blows me away.
And the cost, and Mr. Bergeron, you can clarify the cost, but if we were to have to send any one student to any one of these agriculturals, we're spending,
Approximately $180 to $200 a day for the transportation, which equals about $32,000 to $34,500 on an annualized basis for transportation costs.
one student.
For one student.
Part of the reason is we don't have the economies of scale. And the special ed department, where we do most of our transportation to specialized schools, we have economies of scale.
Right.
We have multiple students going to one school.
So you have shared
The
costs.
collaborative, don't you,
Right.
you share busing with other?
Yes. So I think it's something that we may want to make a proposal to the state to look at changing that. Because especially with the fact that the exploratory year, that 9th grade year, with the exception of the agriculture, which I get, it's a longer program. But that's a lot of money for a district
To have to
to
put
have to,
for
you know,
transportation.
another.
There is a piece of this, though. However, the commissioner may overturn the denial on the part of the district superintendent. The commissioner would take into consideration, if the superintendent of the in-residence district were to deny that student going, two factors: whether the district of residence has designated a school of preference. So again, a little safeguard. It's pretty obvious that we're asked about. But here's the other one: whether the cost of providing transportation to the non-resident student would be more than the average per student amount the district spent in the previous year for non-resident transportation, and that excludes special education transportation.
Right.
I've spoken with the woman in this office.
yeah.
So currently, talking with Mr. Bergeron about this, our average spent per student this year is 0, because we currently have no students out. So it is within my purview to deny, but it is also within the purview of the commissioner to overturn that.
Correct.
And from what I understand, that happens with regularity. So you're right that there's
But
an
it's a-
inconsistency here that is much bigger than we're going to solve. I'm just looking for, let's cross our Ts and dot our Is.
Yep. No,
I'm
and
also
that's-
going to put on the website, there's something about it requires the school district of residence to place a notice. So I'm going to have Raina put that on middle and high schools, just so that we, in the case of, were I to disapprove and the commissioner were to overturn, all
Where
of our
they can
ducks
go.
are in a
Yeah.
row. And again, I'm not looking to hurt any young student who has this dream at all, but I'm looking at the cost to the district that Mr. Bergeron just quoted, and it does seem inordinately unfair and high.
And I think just to Mrs. Matthews' point, tuition, okay. Transportation, I question.
Yeah, correct. So I would,
And that-
I would encourage you to
Write that
start
puppy up.
drafting a resolution
Go to.
for November, and, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries. Acceptance of donations and gifts. We have just one, Ohio Pile Prints. Education donations for Marlborough High School, $26.02.
Motion to accept.
Motion made and seconded to accept. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries. Reports of subcommittees. Any subcommittees wishing to be reported? Got anything? Got anything? Nothing. Members forum. Mrs. Matthews.
I just want to report out that I met with Mr. Bergeron for tonight on the February 28th warrant. I did also meet with him at the last meeting, but I forgot to report it out. I would like to make sure that it's reported out, that I did meet with him on the February 14th warrant as well. And we reviewed the warrant and clarified things, and again, nobody else sent in questions, so I assume everything's okay.
To me. Thank you. Any other? Mrs. Hennessy?
Just was gonna ask, and I could have done it earlier, but it seemed a little awkward at each point, but the bulletins or the daily announcements, or whatever you wanna call it, for both Whitcomb and the high school are sorely delayed. And it would be really great if they could try and stay up on that, because that's like a really huge communications thing.
And could they be at the top of the page too, like the first thing that you see?
Had a conversation just
I'm
yesterday
sorry,
with
what are you
Mrs.
talking
Rago.
about?
On the website.
On the website, they're like a daily bulletin or morning
Oh, yeah.
announcements.
Well, it used to be, you could never find it. You have to like look all the way down.
The old one, you still had it on the
Yeah.
bottom. 'cause
On
it
the
was
new,
shipped to the
I didn't
bottom.
look on the new website, which, by the way, I'm liking it. Yeah, it's great. It's really, it seems much more user-friendly.
Just would be good if they were updated.
But is that, except for all the staff who couldn't
They're
find
not
it,
updated.
email?
One's as old as January 26th, and the other one is February 7th. So it would be really great if they could be updated.
Could I have those dates again, just because I've
Yep.
spoken?
Not a problem.
for the high school,
So,
at least.
and to me, that's why I was asking was maybe because of the transition to the new website. I don't know. But it was a little bit of a shocker to me when I was cruising through the new site, and I'm finding for the high school, it was January 26th was the last one.
I know they have a designated person at the high school who's the liaison who was out,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a backup.
So it was, MHS
February
was
7th?
January 26th, and Whitcomb was February 7th. So again, I give room. I don't know if there was a transition or something.
No.
It just was one of those things, as I'm looking at the new site, I was like,
Should be tight as a drum now, because we are actually
be.
stipending webmasters to take the responsibility in their buildings where, office support had been doing it, and they've got a lot on their plate. I just spoke yesterday with Mrs. Rago. I will speak again in more clarity with
Okay.
these dates. Thank you.
not a problem.
Yep,
Thank
thank you.
you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Any other members wishing to be heard?
I'll do a shout out because Mrs. Patel has been working so hard that the middle school musical, am I correct? Lion King Jr., Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Just Friday, Saturday? 7 p.m.
This weekend.
This weekend.
This
Yes,
weekend.
this weekend. And a shout out to BPA who goes this weekend too for their state conference. So, good luck.
Anyone else?
Everybody's listening at 11 o'clock.
Perfect.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries. We are adjourned at, 10:56.